Space Marines, the Emperor's finest. Each of the 20 legions was stacked with the galaxy's deadliest warriors, genetically crafted to kill everything from Xenos to even each other. But out of all these living weapons, who was the strongest? Who stood at the very top of the power pyramid during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy? Well, today we're diving headfirst into bolter fire to break down the most brutal and most badass warriors from every single legion and then crown each one's undisputed top dog. Before the Heresy shattered the Imperium, before the betrayal at Isstvan, before Terra burned, there were the Space Marine legions. 20 brotherhoods of gene-forged demigods, forged by war, bound by loyalty, and marching to the Emperor's will. But within each of these mighty legions were champions. Warriors whose sheer power, skill, and sheer refusal to die put them a cut above the rest. And today, we're taking a specific look at those champions. This video is all about naming the strongest Space Marine from each of the 20 legions during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. No Primarchs, no Demon Princes, no Dreadnoughts, no post-Heresy plot armor, just pure Heresy era craziness. So that means we will be taking a look at all Space Marines that are still considered human. Characters like Karn, who's just violently blessed by Khorne, or Argel Tau, who shares a body with a demon but hasn't fully lost his humanity, are fair game. That also includes Psykers, since it would be unfair to exclude some characters like Araman or Targutayu Suai. I know this is going to make some folks mad, but I took a good amount of time debating if I wanted to include Psykers and warp-touched individuals. On one hand, this means a lot of really strong duelists are going to get left to the side due to the nature of their stronger brethren. But at the same time, I feel like leaving very powerful characters off the list just because of their corrupted selves or psyker powers is just wrong, if that makes any sense. I know some of you will be pissed with this decision, and the Space Marines I will place ahead of your favorite best boy duelists simply because they are psykers. But that's how it's gonna go, so deal with it, little Timmy. Additionally, we'll be looking at the prime form of each character. So for example, that's Karn during the siege at the height of his corruption to Khorne, or Lucius the Eternal after gaining his ability to never die and essentially becoming the literal embodiment of a piece of shit. So this essentially means that most of the Chaos Space Marines we'll be looking at will be amped by the warp powers of Chaos. I'll probably reiterate this a lot through the video. So here's how it's going to work. For every legion, I'll put forward a few top contenders, break down their feats, reputation, and lore, and then make my pick for who deserves to wear the crown as the strongest warrior of that legion. My logic will be backed up by sources, quotes, and a healthy dose of completely unqualified confidence. Because you know, I'm a talking cow on YouTube, and therefore always right. Following this video, we'll be diving even deeper with a full ranking of every champion we choose today, to finally crown the strongest Space Marine from the Horus Heresy. So keep your eyes peeled, because that showdown is going to be simply glorious. Also, for all my 40K fans out there, don't worry. I know I explore the Horus Heresy lore a lot, as you can probably tell it's my favorite part of 40K, but I will be doing a follow-up video covering the strongest Space Marine from every modern chapter in the 41st millennium. But right now, we're keeping things strictly Heresy. So as always guys, we're going in number order, so the Dark Angels are up first. Let's start this glorious showdown. The Dark Angels were the Emperor's first Space Marine Legion. They were elite, secretive, and relentlessly efficient with a reputation for carrying out the most complex and high-risk operations across the Imperium. Their structure and tactics reflected an ancient sense of order and purpose, shaped by a mix of Terran veterans and the knightly traditions of their Primarch's home world. Their Primarch, Lionel Johnson, or simply known as the Lion, was discovered on Caliban, a forest death world plagued by warp beasts. The Lion grew up alone in the wilds, but eventually joined the knightly orders of Caliban after being discovered by Luther. When the Emperor found him, the Lion unified his new brothers with the Dark Angels, fusing knightly honor with brutal military discipline. During the Horus Heresy, the Dark Angels were far from Terra, stuck in devastating campaigns in the outer reaches of the galaxy. They launched a full-scale extermination effort against traitor-held systems, fought brutal wars of attrition against the Night Lords, and clashed with both the Death Guard and the Alpha Legion. After Horus fell, they played a key role in the Scouring, leading some of the fiercest retribution campaigns against retreating traitor forces. But the Legion's greatest wound came from within. While the Lion led the war abroad, he left Luther, his closest friend and once father figure, behind to rule Caliban. Luther had helped rise and guide the Lion in his youth, and was once a respected hero amongst the Dark Angels. But over time, bitterness, isolation, and the warp corrupted him and twisted him. When the Lion returned, he found Caliban in open rebellion. The resulting civil war shattered the planet, left the Lion critically wounded, saw Luther captured, and the fallen angels scattered across time and space by a giant warp storm. This is where the Dark Angels officially died as a legion, although we know that's all bullshit. So now, let's get to the contenders. We'll be looking at all the Dark Angels, so that includes the Fallen, as they still count as part of the Legion, which means Space Marines like Cypher are valid contenders for the title of the strongest Dark Angel. I know, I can hear fans moaning about Luther. Well, Luther is not a Space Marine, he's still a human, just a very enhanced one that is essentially a Space Marine in all but name. I know that's confusing, but Luther is not a Space Marine, and thus we won't count him. We will be using this rule going forward, so no Corfarion either. This honestly helps me solve the issue of where the hell I would put Luther, since he technically does beat the Lion. Thank God I don't have to deal with that. Now, let's take a look at the top candidates for the strongest Dark Angel during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. But before we get to the main event, here are some honorable mentions, so Dark Angel fans don't kill me. First, we have is Holgan, who was the commander of the Deathwing during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. He survived all three Rang Dang Xenocides and fought against the Night Lords during the Thramas Crusade. He's such a cool character, but we just don't see any real combat feats from him to really discuss him in great detail. Then we have Ferrith Redloss, commander of the Dreadwing and the Honor Guard of Lionel Johnson. He helped lead the hunt for Conrad Kurz-on-Macrad, and he would go on to command the Dark Angels during the Second Battle of Davin, managing to survive both the Ruin Storm and the destruction of Caliban, where he would capture Luther after his battle with Lionel Johnson, resulting in him being named the Grand Master of the Legion. But once again, just like Holgan, we don't see much from him in terms of combat, so it's impossible to grade him. But now, onto the real heavyweights. First we have Corswain, who was the first Legion's champion. Not because he was loud, flashy, or favored by the warp, but because he was simply one of the finest warriors the Imperium has ever produced. He wasn't a psyker or possessed, just pure unrelenting swordsmanship. Corswain's greatest feat is his duel with Sevatar, the first captain of the Night Lords. The two clashed during the Thramas Crusade in a battle that ended in a draw, which might sound modest until you realize Sevatar was considered one of the deadliest Astartes alive, having a history of defeating hundreds of opponents and foresight similar to his insane father, Conrad Kurz. Holding him off blade to blade is an almost unmatched feat. He also fought at the Siege of Terra, dueling against Plague and other corrupted Marines, reaping a vicious tally of corrupted cousins. Another feat that is spoken and not shown is him defeating Aljos, master of the Ninth Order of the Dark Angels, who is stated to be one of the greatest warriors in the Imperium. We'll get to him in a second. Then there's Zariel El Zaras, better known to many as the likely identity of the infamous Cypher. Zahariel was once a knight of Caliban, inducted into the Librarius, and then later joined the Legion itself. Even before receiving full Astartes enhancements, he demonstrated powerful psychic abilities, using telepathy and domination to pacify warp-mutated beasts. As a full Librarian, his powers only grew stronger. Left behind on Caliban, Zahariel eventually joined Luther's rebellion, not out of spite, but out of belief that something was deeply wrong with the Imperium's soul. If the theory is true that Zahariel became Cypher, then we're talking about someone who not only survived the Heresy, but the Scouring, the Age of Apostate, and 10,000 years of being hunted by Inquisitors, Custodes, and the Dark Angels themselves. His mix of psychic powers, stealth, and swordplay makes him one of the most complete warriors in the First Legion's history, even if much of his strength remains hidden in mystery and misdirection. Zahariel has some incredible feats, able to phase in and out of reality, as well as your normal psychic abilities. Some of his dueling feats include killing the past Cypher, many warp beasts, and eventually having a duel with Corswain, which Luther did state Corswain won, but it's hard to tell if this was the truth or not. Our third and final candidate is Aljos, Ninth Order Master, who fought with the Legion throughout the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. A skilled duelist and one of the best in the First Legion, Aljos carved a brutal path throughout the Thramas Crusade, leading kill teams and siege forces against Night Lord terror cells. Serving primarily as the Lion's personal bodyguard, Aljos' prowess is more spoken of than shown, as it is stated that he is the greatest warrior in the Legion, lasting a full minute against his Primarch the Lion in combat, which is a pretty insane feat when you think about it. Even going further to state that he suspected the number of Legion's Astartes warriors capable of besting him numbered fewer than 20 across all the legions. He specifically names Jubal Khan of the White Scars, Abaddon of the Sons of Horus, Sevatar of the Night Lords, and Sigismund of the Imperial Fists. Outside of those four, Aljos has been actually bested by Mir Ostalin and Corswain. So the two duels I want to look at specifically to help us scale Aljos are with Sevatar. Their first duel happens off screen, which seems to be the story of Aljos' life. Sevatar defeats him in this one, taking half of Aljos' face with it. Ouch. The other happens at the height of the Horus Heresy, during the Thramas Crusade, when Conrad and the Lion have a meeting, bringing their respective bodyguards. Conrad brings Shang and Sevatar, and the Lion brings Aljos and Corswain. Ultimately, the two sides end up in a fight, with Aljos sacrificing himself so Corswain could run to the aid of the Lion, who, to put it politely, was getting his face bashed in by Conrad. Aljos dies, getting beheaded by Sevatar. But this in itself is an insane feat. Aljos manages to hold off Sevatar, who has foresight, suppressed psychic powers, and is easily one of the best duelists in the whole Imperium. But we'll get to him in a little bit. Sevatar wasn't even fighting alone. He had Shang alongside him, and Shang is no slouch himself. He would later hold himself against a demon sword-empowered marine, Jendor Scrivok. So although most of what we see on screen is him losing, he is still one of the greatest duelists in 30k, and definitely worth a mention. I know, you're wondering where Mir Ostalin is. Well, fuck that dude, he's a prick. Somehow he beat Aljos, but for the rest of the Heresy, he just sucks. That's all you really need to know about him, guys. So who takes the crown? Once again, I am so thankful I don't have to include Luther, because that would cause some drama. But without him, we get a debate between Corswain, the Lion's champion, Zahariel, Lord Cypher, and Aljos, the Ninth Order's chapter master. Corswain does stand apart though. No warp powers, no psychic tricks, just pure skill and terrifying efficiency, which earned him the title of the champion of the First Legion. His battle with Sevatar, which I will admit was quite short as Corswain disengaged to save the Lion, is still impressive as Corswain fought evenly with Sevatar, who is literally one of the greatest warriors in the Imperium. Outside of this, Corswain is constantly shown to be a monster in combat, easily slaughtering traitor marines, even those that were buffed by chaos. As Caliban was falling, even the traitor's Dark Angels fled from Corswain, and I quote, saying that he was death, essentially meaning they stood no chance against him in combat. Then we have Zahariel, the Lord Cypher, and possibly the greatest psyker in the First Legion, with the ability to perceive time slower, phase in and out of reality, and increase his stamina and energy. Zahariel is shown to be able to slay the great warp beasts on Caliban and battle the psychic might of other Chaos Warlocks. So with these formidable abilities, how does he not trump Corswain, who has no psychic powers, and to put it simply, is just a guy with a sword? Well, when Zahariel is fighting on Terra alongside Corswain, Zahariel is beaten and severely wounded by Typhus, the Death Guard captain, before Corswain, yes Corswain, comes to his rescue. Even further, Zahariel does not seem capable of lighting the Astronomicon, which I believe would be possible if he was a stronger psyker, but I could be wrong. So Zahariel has some great capabilities, but when it comes to single combat, he seems to fall behind the First Legion's champion, Corswain, who does not seem to struggle with the champions of the God of Decay, and even further, if Luther is to be believed, Corswain defeated Zahariel in single combat. Then we come to Aljos, master of the Dark Angels and one of its finest warriors. And I'm not gonna lie guys, Aljos is such a cool character, but he's pretty much Corswain, but weaker. 1. He loses to Corswain. 2. He somehow loses to the piece of shit that is Mir Ostalin, which boggles my mind. But thirdly, he does hold off Shang and Sevatar at the same time, which is a good feat, I will not lie. So who is the champion of the First Legion then? Well, with Aljos losing to Corswain, I feel that Corswain is the best warrior of the First Legion. In summary, Zahariel is a powerful psyker, but clearly lacks the dueling skills. Aljos is a great duelist, and maybe if the First Legion was lacking in legionaries, I would consider putting Aljos truly in the heart of the debate. But as I said earlier, Corswain defeats Aljos, so Aljos just ends up being a support to why Corswain is the ultimate champion. You all saw this coming, so don't act surprised. Corswain is the Dark Angels champion. Now, onto the mysterious Second Legion. Now we arrive at the Second Legion, the greatest mystery of the Imperium, the one so shrouded in secrecy that even saying its name out loud might get you a visit from the Inquisition. Fortunately, that's not a problem because it doesn't have a name. The Second Legion was erased so thoroughly from history that we don't know their name, their Primarch, their color scheme, or even what they like to order at the Mechanicum drive-thru. After countless hours of deep research, forbidden texts, and entirely made-up sources, I can confidently say the strongest warrior of the Second Legion is...
Turn myself into a pickle, Morty! Boom! Big reveal, I'm a pickle. What do you think about that? I turned myself into a pickle! I'm Pickle Rick!
All jokes aside, the Second Legion is a void. A deliberate mystery left by the writers to be filled with speculation, headcanon, or ignored entirely depending on your mood. So for now, we pour one out for the Second Legion and immediately move on to the Third Legion, the Emperor's Children, where things start getting really loud.
Face to the dome like...
The Third Legion, the Emperor's Children, were once the paragons of nobility, grace, and martial perfection. Named in honor of their loyalty to the Emperor himself, they sought excellence in all things: warfare, discipline, and aesthetics. Their Primarch Fulgrim was found on Chemos, a desolate industrial world where efficiency was survival. From this crucible, Fulgrim emerged as a perfectionist and artist, driven by ambition and idealism. Reunited with the Emperor, he shaped his sons into a mirror of his own lofty ideals. Under Fulgrim's guidance, the Emperor's Children became a favored legion, elegant in battle, articulate in philosophy, and unshakable in their devotion to the Imperium. Then came the Horus Heresy, and perfection curdled into madness. Fulgrim, corrupted by an evil demon sword, plunged his legion into damnation. The Emperor's Children devolved into torturers, madmen, and walking symphonies of death. Music became a weapon, pain became a rapture. The Legion's fall was steep and theatrical. From the Istvan massacres to the depravity unleashed during the Siege of Terra, they reveled in atrocities that made even other traitor legions recoil. Out of this madness, 3 champions rose to define the heights or depths of the Emperor's Children. But let's start with the honorable mentions again. And oh boy, this is a controversial take. Tesserus Arcodua, I have no idea if I said that right, the first recorded champion of the Legion, had some serious promise. This guy fought Ferrus Manus in single combat, yes, a literal Primarch, and actually held his own. That's pretty insane. But the duel happened just 70 years into the Great Crusade, and Tesserus died not long after, so we never get to see his full potential. Still, that Ferrus fight earns him a spot in the halls of what could have been. Unfortunately, I feel like he just doesn't have enough feats to really compare him with the other candidates on this list. Sorry, Emperor's Children fans. Then there's Saul Tarvitz, the goat of loyalty. He wasn't the strongest, he wasn't the fastest, his dueling was average, and he got slapped around by Lucius, but Saul had something the rest of them lost: fucking balls. He defied the Legion's betrayal, warned the loyalists at Istvan III, and held the line against impossible odds. He went down swinging, leading a resistance that saved countless lives and made Horus work for his treachery. He might not win the crown, but he earns every ounce of my respect. I know I made some other Emperor's Children fans mad, but who are the candidates for the strongest of the Third Legion? First up, we've got Lucius the Eternal, the most iconic freak show of the bunch. Once a vain but gifted swordsman, Lucius was obsessed with perfection and close combat. During the Great Crusade, he served with distinction and arrogance in equal measure. By the time of the Heresy, he'd become a dueling prodigy, even besting several first captains across various legions. His rivalry with Saul Tarvitz cultivated in the betrayal in Istvan III, where Lucius turned against the loyalists and joined the traitors. From there, his prowess only grew as he spiraled into madness, and chaos whispered sweet nothings to his ego. Then there's Eidoan, the Legion's Lord Commander and a one-man war crime. Eidoan was already a seasoned commander before the Heresy began, but once Fabius Bile worked his surgical nightmare magic on him, Eidoan became something else entirely. Augmented with warp field enhancements, including a Xenos sonic shriek that could rupture organs and shatter armor, Eidoan was less of a fighter and more of a Slaaneshi WMD. He fought in Isstvan 3, Isstvan 5, and the Siege of Terra. He wasn't as precise as Lucius, but made up for it with sheer grotesque devastation. Rounding out the trio is Julius Caesaron, first captain of the Emperor's Children. And look, Julius is one of my favorite characters from the book Fulgrim. He's a perfect representation of the slow, seductive corruption of the Third Legion. As Julius falls, he grows stronger. He learns to endure pain. Hell, he even enjoys it. He's there from the Dropside Massacre to the Siege of Terra and every twisted act in between. Julius survives the Heresy, just like Lucius. He seems to thrive the deeper he sinks into Slaanesh's madness. He even fights Gabriel Santar, first captain of the Iron Hands, during Isstvan 5, and wins, though half of his face gets burned off, which, I'm not gonna lie, Julius kinda considers a bonus, because he's an absolute freak. But does he have the combat resume to top Lucius or Eidoan? That's the true question. So who takes the crown here? I'm not gonna lie, all three get absolutely wrecked at various points throughout the Heresy. Julius loses half of his face.
That's rough, buddy.
Eidoan literally gets his head cut off.
Emotional, damn it!
And Lucius gets smacked around like a piñata at a Cornite birthday party.
You suck!
He's memed into oblivion, but is he the loser everyone thinks he is? Let's break it down. Starting with Lucius the Eternal. Lucius is known for being the best duelist in the Third Legion, but somehow he's the only guy who loses a lot. Or does he? Let's do a deep breakdown of his major duels during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. Before we jump into it though, I want to say that each of these duels we're going over is a significant Space Marine, one that is known to be powerful throughout the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. We won't be going into duels that are with no-name Marines, merely sticking to those that we know that are powerful and significant throughout the Heresy. So with that said, let's start with the first duel, which is with Garveil Loken of the Luna Wolves. They fight twice, with Loken winning the first bout, although with a dirty punch. But Lucius wins the rematch cleanly. So if Loken technically disobeying the laws of sparring, I'm gonna give Lucius the series here. The next opponent Lucius fights is Commander Ascalon of the Blood Angels, who sparred with Lucius to first blood. And when Lucius achieved victory, he was tackled by Ascalon and thrown into the sea, like a loser. This is still a victory since Lucius objectively won the duel. Following him, Lucius defeated Erebus in a friendly duel. And yes, I know Erebus is a colossal piece of shit, but he's definitely no slouch in combat, especially at this stage. After the bald cunt, we have Solomon Demeter. This one's a little heavy. After slaughtering about 30 loyalist Marines, Lucius manipulates Demeter into helping him finish them off, then turns on him and duels him. Lucius, despite being exhausted and wounded, kills Solomon Demeter. Demeter was one of the most steadfast and honorable Emperor's children. He survived the Lair campaign, Istvan's betrayal, the virus bombing, everything, just to die to fucking Lucius. God damn, I hate that prick. Right after killing Demeter and 30 loyalist Space Marines, Lucius goes toe-to-toe with Salt Tarvitz, captain of the Emperor's Children. Despite being wrecked from the previous fight, Lucius manages to hold his own until Tarvitz brings in reinforcements, forcing Lucius to retreat. Considering the circumstances, that's seriously impressive. And then we come to one of my favorite Space Marines, Naikoa Sharokin. Lucius fights Sharokin twice during the Angels Exterminatus campaign alongside the Iron Warriors. The first time, Naikoa wounds Lucius and retreats. The second time, it's an absolute beatdown. Naikoa dances around Lucius, stabs him, and then kills him. Lucius resurrects for the first time due to Slaanesh's intervention, but because Naikoa felt no emotion, the Slaaneshi resurrection clause doesn't kick in. Lore logic, everybody, it makes total sense. Following him, we have Connacht of the 1,000 Suns. This one is kinda wild. Connacht was such a powerful duelist that even the Corvdai Seers couldn't see how he'd be defeated. Lucius goes toe-to-toe with him in a close fight and disarms him. Ahriman steps in before Lucius can land the killing blow, but definitely a W for Lucius. And then finally, we have his fight with Sigismund during the Siege of Terra. This fight is all hearsay and we never actually see it happen throughout the books. But we do know that Lucius lost to Sigismund, but obviously he didn't die. Not much detail is given, but yeah, it tracks that Sigismund could defeat Lucius. So what's the final score? Lucius defeats Loken, Ascalon, Erebus, Demeter, and Sankant. He fights Tarvitz to a draw while completely injured, and then he loses to Sherokin twice and Sigismund. That's a pretty damn good record for someone memed as the Legion's eternal loser. Say what you want, Lucius wins fights pretty often. So now that we know that Lucius the Eternal is a pretty strong duelist, let's look at our other candidates, starting with Julius Caesaron. Julius is similar to Lucius, a gifted duelist who thrives as he descends into corruption. His most notable duel is against Gabriel Santar during the Dropside Massacre, where he wins but gets his face burned off. Beyond that, Julius is mostly shown fighting Eldar, Loyalists, and his own men. No other high-profile duels. He survives the Heresy, which is a huge feat, but in terms of combat feats, Lucius outpaces him. Finally, we have our third candidate, Eidolon. Eidolon is a powerhouse, not subtle, not graceful, but absolutely horrifying. Augmented by Fabius Bile, he's stronger and faster than any normal Astartes, with a sonic scream that liquefies enemies. He has two key duels I want to look at. First is his duel with Quinn Ja, first captain of the White Scars. Eidolon defeats him, which is a pretty big deal, since Quinn Ja is fast, strong, and a master duelist despite wearing Terminator armor. Eidolon takes him down using raw power, speed, and sonic devastation. The second fight is against Rogel Dorn and Sigismund during the Siege of Terra. Eidolon actually manages to land a blow on Rogel Dorn, but let's be fair, Dorn had just fought Demon Primarch Fulgrim and was battling 50 other Space Marines at once. Eidolon sneaking in a few hits isn't that shocking. The fight ends when Sigismund throws Eidolon off the wall like a chaos-infused potato. So who wins here? Eidolon has the biggest physical feats, he's chaos-juiced, equipped with alien scream tech, and killed Quinn Ja. But his wins are brute force based. Julius is cool, tragic, and twisted, but he lacks high-tier duels. Lucius, though, he has the best record. His resume includes multiple wins against high-level opponents, some while injured or exhausted. He loses to Sherokin and Sigismund, two of the greatest warriors in the Heresy, but defeats Loken, Erebus, Demeter, and Sankant. And he's functionally immortal thanks to Slaanesh. Dude could lose every fight for the rest of eternity and still come back sharper. Eidolon beats Quinn Ja, but I think Sherokin, Loken, and Sankant are tougher matchups, and Lucius either beat them or kept up with them. So yeah, controversial take, but Lucius is the strongest legionary from the Emperor's Children. He's a terrible person, a nightmare of ego and spite, and looks like a chaos shrimp, but he's got the skills, the feats, and the receipts. Alright, let's move on to the crybabies of the 4th Legion. The Iron Warriors, the 4th Legion, were the Imperium's hammer of attrition. Siege Masters, Trench Warlords, and the embodiment of cold, calculated warfare. Where other legions sought glory in the charge, or honor in the duel, the Iron Warriors found purpose in the grind. Artillery barrages, fortified kill zones, and brutal efficiency. Under their Primarch Perturabo, a master of fortification and bitterness, they became the experts of breaking defenses, and eventually of breaking themselves. Resentful of the favoritism shown to other legions, they simmered into quiet rage until the Horus Heresy gave them a chance to flip the table. When they turned traitor, they turned completely, not out of faith, but because they'd been handed a license to destroy everything that had failed to appreciate them. Now, the 4th Legion isn't exactly stacked with champions. You look at some of the other legions and they've got dueling prodigies, psychic monsters, or warp field nightmares. The Iron Warriors, not so much. They're more about faceless ranks and cult competence, but even in that sea of grim determination, two names rise to the top: Forex and Kroger. One's a hardened warlord with monstrous feats to his name, the other kinda just exists. Let's start with Forex, because honestly, he's the only real contender here. Forex is what happens when you distill the entire Legion's ethos into one person: unbreakable, methodical, and terrifying effective. During the Siege of Terra, he led a full chapter-sized force, 1,000 Space Marines, behind enemy lines into the depths of the Lionsgate spaceport. That kind of mission is basically suicide wrapped in a war crime. And it was. Everyone in his force died, except for Forex. He was the last one standing, and if that wasn't absurd enough, he single-handedly destroyed a Warhound Titan. Then there's Kroger. Oh, Kroger. He tries, bless his heart. He's a rage-fueled lunatic who eventually chucks whatever dignity he had when he left to worship corn. Kroger's main contribution to the Heresy are yelling, getting mad, and I will admit, taking the Lionsgate spaceport by being the biggest moron of all time. His single greatest feat is besting Fafnir Ran of the Imperial Fist, but outside of that, all of his feats are implied, and anytime he tries to flex his authority, someone smarter dunks on him. Even with his best feat against Ran, it isn't that impressive, as Fafnir Ran himself does not do too much in terms of feats. So yeah, the 4th Legion doesn't have a massive roster of dueling legends or warp monstrosities, but it doesn't need them. Forex is enough. Tactical brilliance, siege-forged endurance, and slaying a Warhound Titan easily puts Forex as the champion of the 4th Legion. It's time to Tokyo Drift with the White Scars next. The 5th Legion, the White Scars, were warriors of wind and thunder, elusive, lightning fast, and deeply rooted in the traditions of the steppe. Unlike their more rigid brother legions, the White Scars embrace mobility and unpredictability, striking their foes with overwhelming speed before vanishing like ghosts. To outsiders, they were seen as savage or reckless, but in truth, they followed a precise code of honor, poetry, and brutal efficiency in battle. Every raid was a calculated blur of motion and momentum, every warrior a master of the hunt. Their Primarch Jagatai Khan was discovered on the windswept world of Horus, where he rose from orphan to warlord king among nomadic tribes. He brought with him a belief in personal freedom, honor, and the idea that warfare was as much about timing and movement as it was about strength. When united with the Emperor, the Khan reshaped the White Scars into a brotherhood of storm riders, a legion unlike any other. Despite being misunderstood by the wider Imperium, they served with distinction during the Great Crusade, carving their legacy across the stars. Then came the Horus Heresy, and the White Scars stood at a crossroads. Isolated from the rest of the Imperium, they hesitated, uncertain of where truth lay and the swirling lies and betrayal. That uncertainty shattered when nearly half of the Legion attempted to drag the rest into Horus's fold. In response, Jagatai Khan drew his blade and smacked his sons back into line. From that moment, the White Scars were loyalists, but they would not wage war like the others. For much of the Heresy, they waged a shadow campaign, striking at traitor supply lines, ambushing fleets, and bleeding Horus's advance dry. During the siege, they rode out from behind the Eternity Wall, charging the battlefield to rescue millions of Imperial civilians from certain death and carving into the enemy with unmatched ferocity. Now, for the champions of the Legion, unlike the others we've discussed, the White Scars don't revolve around celebrity warriors or vainglorious duels. But don't let that fool you. The White Scars have some of the greatest warriors from the Horus Heresy. Let's get to the candidates. We're not talking about one or two names, we've got a whole lot of candidates for the title of the strongest legionary of the White Scars. First, we'll start with Shiban Khan, the Talkseeker, or as many of the White Scars fanboys know him as, the motherfucking GOAT. Shiban Khan is one of the greatest duelists in the 5th Legion, which is saying something. Literally all of these guys are great duelists, I'm not kidding. Shiban fought from the very beginning of the Heresy to the Great Khan's charge of the Lionsgate spaceport. Ever a monster in combat, Shiban has some awesome feats. Although most of his body has been replaced by mechanical parts due to the attrition of the Heresy, Shiban was as lethal as ever. Besides murdering dozens of traitor losers, Shiban's greatest feat was being stranded behind enemy lines during the Siege of Terra. We're talking way behind enemy lines, and he still managed to fight his way back to the loyalist lines. Not even by himself, he was literally carrying a full-grown man and a baby with him, wielding nothing but a metal rod. Wow, what a lad. Then we have Jubal Khan, who is known as one of the greatest duelists, not just in the White Scars, but in the whole Astartes legions. The dude has two cool nicknames: Lord of the Summer Lightning and the Death That Comes with Laughter.
Oh my god, he's so goddamn cool!
What the hell? That's so freaking cool. Jubal Khan did lose to Abaddon at the beginning of the Siege of Terra during a zero-gravity duel, but we'll get to that in a second. Jubal, like I said, is famed as one of the greatest duelists in the legions. During the Sigismund book, Templar, Jubal Khan and Sigismund fight in an honor duel, and it's pretty darn close, but of course Sigismund wins. So Jubal fights one of the best duelists in the Heresy and manages to hold his own pretty well. That's a pretty damn good feat. Now back to his fight with Abaddon. At the beginning of the Solar War, Jubal and his White Scars ambush Abaddon and his fleet as they head towards Luna. In zero gravity, the two fight, and Jubal, whose main tactic is a death by 1,000 cuts, wounds Abaddon quite a bit, who mind you isn't Terminator armor. Ultimately, Jubal extends himself too far against Abaddon, who is a great duelist himself, which ends up with him being killed in a single stroke. The sad part about Jubal is this is all we see from him, which is pretty damn disappointing. But he is pitted against two great opponents and he holds his own until, you know, he doesn't. After Jubal, we have Hibu Khan, commander of the Brotherhood of the Dawn Sky. He started as a traitor, siding with Torgan Khan and their conspiracy to make the Legion side with Horus. When the plan failed and the Khan committed the White Scars to the Loyalist cause, Hibu willingly surrendered himself, rejoining the Legion as one of the Sagiar Masan. Later, he would lead his Brotherhood against Horus Aximon and the Sons of Horus, badly wounding little Horus and making his face look like a literal piece of goo. This is unfortunately the only feat we have for Hibu, besides him looking really freaking cool. So why is he in the running? Well, Aximon, although he might not look it, is a pretty darn good duelist. He's able to slay several captains of note throughout the Heresy, like Torgotten, his former brother of the Luna Wolves, and Boreas of the Black Templars. He would also hold his own against Loken and Sigismund before finally being slain by Loken in their final fight. So Hibu Khan being able to wound Aximon pretty severely is a pretty good feat. Following Hibu, we have Torgan Khan. Torgan is in the same boat as Hibu, as he was briefly a traitor before surrendering to the Khan, and thus he suffered the same fate, becoming a member of the Sagiar Masan, the suicidal company of the White Scars dedicating to tackling the most deadly missions that were borderline suicidal. For 4 years, Torgan led his company in mission after mission until ultimately, Torgan was the highest ranking survivor left. He doesn't have a ton of feats to be honest, but I just wanted to mention him because of the size of his testicles. As the White Scars attempted to retreat to Terra, the Death Guard ambushed them, and in order to retreat, Torgan and his remaining men set a trap for the Death Guard on the flagship of the 5th Legion, the Sword Storm. When Mortarion teleported aboard, he was ambushed by Torgan and the remaining Sagiar Mansan, who had set the Sword Storm's engines to overload in an attempt to kill the traitor Primarch. Torgan would die fighting Morty, who would remark that he died joyful. Wow, what an end for the absolute lad. After Torgan is Quinja, first captain of the White Scars, who is one of the few 5th Legionaries that is fitted in Terminator armor. Quinja is a personal favorite of many White Scar fans, and I mean, it makes sense. Look at this dude. Quinja fights throughout the Great Crusade and a majority of the Horus Heresy before meeting his fate in a diversion tactic against Eidolon. Rest in peace, my king. And finally, we have the Storm Seer, Targutai Yusugai. Targutai Yusugai is the chief Stormseer of the White Scars, which essentially means he's the chief librarian of the Legion and the strongest psyker in the 5th Legion. Let me tell you, Targutai is a frickin' monster and my personal favorite psyker in all the Space Marine Legions, outside of the 1,000 Suns, who obviously hold a very special place in my heart. Say it with me guys, Magnus did nothing wrong! Targutai's combat feats are absolutely incredible. In the book Scars, his ship is boarded by 12 Space Marines, and he manages to defeat them in a matter of seconds. Using his psychic abilities, he destroys their bolter rounds mid-flight, crushes their weapons with a gesture, and throws Space Marines around with the flick of his wrist. I mean, when compared to other Legionary duelists, you might think, Sigismund or Garn could probably carve through 12 Legionaries, and yeah, you'd probably be right, they probably could, but I'm not just looking at what Targutai did, I'm looking at how he did it. The guy didn't move a muscle besides his hands and just deleted 12 Space Marines. Easily. That suggests he's capable of defeating multiple squads, maybe even half a company or more. And this isn't even his best feat. As the White Scars near destruction during the Battle of Catalyst, Targutai sat upon a prototype golden throne at the Dark Glass space station and opened a portal into the Webway itself, allowing the entire White Scars fleet to escape and return to Terra. This feat speaks for itself. Although he only survived on it briefly, Targutai was not only able to open a portal large enough for the whole fleet to travel through, but his psychic abilities were so strong that he perceived the Webway itself and even glimpsed the Emperor's grand design before being obliterated. This truly shows that Targutai is one of the strongest psychers in the Imperium. Not even Malcador the Sigillite, who is probably the third strongest psyker, behind Magnus the Red and the Emperor, could survive the Golden Throne for more than a day. Targutai, he lasted a couple minutes, but he still did it, making him a freaking beast. So who's the strongest? Although I'm gonna get thoroughly bashed for this pick, I feel like it's a pretty obvious one. Some of you are assuming it's Jubal, and to those of you I say, you're wrong. Yes, wrong. Shocking, isn't it? But also, not really. Since we're including psychers, it's painfully obvious that Targutai is the strongest White Scar from the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy era. I mean, if we compare the others to Targutai, sure, they're all great duelists with feats that make a strong case for the strongest warrior of the 5th Legion. Shiban fighting his way back to the Imperial Palace with a literal metal rod, Hebo Khan wounding Aximon and defeating him in a duel, Torgan Khan surviving 4 years of suicidal missions and facing down Mortarion in single combat, and Jubal Khan fighting both Sigismund and Abaddon on equal footing for quite some time. But none of these feats compare to Targutai, who's shown to easily, and I mean easily, defeat squads of Space Marines and wield psychic powers at such a level that he can operate a prototype Golden Throne and manipulate the Webway. The guy is shown to have strong telepathy, command warp lightning, and even has glimpses of foresight. I just can't simply put anyone over him. The White Scars have a ton of strong duelists, but I don't think any of them can compare to the powers Targutai displays throughout the Horus Heresy. For Jubal Khan, the Lord of Summer Lightning, I will make a special exception for. In the follow-up video, where I will rank all the champions I've selected in this video from weakest to strongest, I will include Jubal Khan because I genuinely feel like he's one of the powerhouses of the Heresy, and he just gets unfortunately shafted by his brother being one of the strongest psychers in this setting. Content, White Scar fans? I hope so. On to the Space Furries. The 6th Legion, the Space Wolves, were the Emperor's executioners. Savage, unrelenting, and terrifyingly effective. Known as the Vilca Fenrica, the Wolves hailed from the icy death world of Fenris, a place of constant war, monstrous beasts, and apocalyptic winters. To many across the Imperium, they were brutes, howling berserkers more beast than man. But beneath that image lay a core of brutal intelligence, honor, and ancient warrior tradition. Their Primarch, Leman Russ, was the living embodiment of Fenris, wild, untamed, but bound by an iron loyalty to the Emperor. Russ saw himself as the Emperor's hound, unleashed to bring ruin to traitors, witches, and monsters alike. He had no patience for politics or pretense. What mattered to him was truth, loyalty, and the strength of the pack. During the Great Crusade, Russ's wolves were the legion you sent when you didn't want survivors. They were the Imperium's deterrent. If the Space Wolves were coming for you, it meant the Emperor had already made his decision. Then came the Horus Heresy, and the Space Wolves, well, let's just say they were kinda used. The Emperor sent them to bring Magnus the Red to heal after the whole psychic phone call that shattered the Webway incident. But what Russ didn't know was that Horus had already tampered with the message. Instead of a stern warning and a trip back to Terra, Russ was tricked into launching a full-scale extermination of Prospero, wiping out the 1,000 Suns and driving Magnus into the arms of chaos. Way to go, Russ. After that, Russ decided the best course of action was to charge off on a literal suicide mission to kill the big balding menace, Horus Lubercal. Shockingly, this failed, and who could have predicted that? Once again, way to go, Russ. After that, the Space Wolves practically disappeared from the rest of the Heresy. And yes, I hate the Space Wolves, but I promise I'll try to stay unbiased throughout this part of the video. Emphasis on try. So who are the champions of the Space Wolves? And honestly, for a legion that was supposed to be the executors of the Space Marine legions, it was kinda hard attempting to find a suitable candidate for champion of the 6th. But I found multiple that should put up a good debate. First, let's start with Beorn the Fellhand. Before he was interned in a dreadnought and became everyone's cranky metal grandpa, Beorn was one of the most respected warriors of the Space Wolves. During the Great Crusade, Beorn was a rising star amongst the rout, renowned for his ferocity, discipline, and a sense of honor. During the Heresy, he fought on Prospero during the destruction of the 1,000 Suns, and then later he accompanied Leman Russ to his final duel with Horus Lubercal. Next, we have Othir Weirdmage, who was one of the Space Wolves' Ruin Priests during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. A psyker, but don't you dare call him that unless you want your throat ripped out. The rout refused the term Librarian or Sorcerer, insisting their powers were gifts from the Allfather and Fenris, not the Warp.
You serious?
Which doesn't really make a lot of sense, but the Space Wolves are kinda morons. So it kinda tracks, to be honest. During the Great Crusade, Weirdmage was one of the most powerful and respected rune priests of his time. During the Heresy, he was present at Prospero and played a major role in countering the 1,000 Suns sorcery. He would die facing airmen who would overwhelm him psychically and leave his soul to be devoured by warp predators. Our third candidate is Joran Bloodhound, who was the Jarl of Dektra, the infamous 13th Great Company of the Space Wolves, also known as the Wolf Brothers during the Great Crusade. Joran was the embodiment of the rout's savage glory, bold, aggressive, and fearless to the point of madness. During the Great Crusade, as the leader of the 13th Company, Joran gained a reputation for brutal shock assault tactics, frequently leading his warriors into the heart of enemy formations with fang and fury. Joran led from the front, a towering berserker of a commander who relished close quarters combat and never flinched from the bloodiest missions. During the Heresy, it's believed Joran was still the Wolf Lord of the 13th Great Company at the outbreak of the Heresy, before eventually being succeeded by Bolvi Greybeard. The exact circumstances of this change are unknown, but the entire 13th Company would eventually vanish under mysterious circumstances, presumed lost in the warp or scattered during the Heresy's later stages. Our fourth and final candidate is Bolvi Greybeard, who we literally just spoke about, but we're gonna do it again. Also known as the Old Wolf, Bolvine was the Jarl of Dektra, the 13th Great Company of the Space Wolves, succeeding Joran Bloodhound, who we just spoke about as well, shortly before or during the Horus Heresy. A stoic and seasoned warrior, Bolvine became a mystic figure among the rout for his grim wisdom, endurance, and the shadow that eventually overtook him. During the Heresy, Bolvine was a key figure in the Battle of Prospero, where he personally clashed with the 1,000 Sun Psyker, totally gonna butcher this, Iskar Or, a battle which led him to be lost in the Webway, ultimately leading to the mysterious disappearance of the entire 13th Company from the Imperial records. So who is the strongest among the Space Wolves? Honestly, picking a champion for the 6th Legion is surprisingly easy. Finding the candidates was the hard part, like, suspiciously hard. And I know I clown on the Wolves a lot, but credit where it's due. Trying to find a named Space Wolf with consistent lore across the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy is like trying to find a sober Slaaneshi cult. Nearly impossible. But once you've got a few names, the answer becomes clear. The main issue with the Space Wolves is that they are at their peak during the raising of Prospero, and then they kind of vanish for the most of the Heresy. Some of them show up during the Siege of Terra, but in terms of standout feats or named duels, it's pretty slim pickings. That said, the obvious answer for the champion of the 6th Legion, the Space Wolves, is Beorn the Fellhanded, and it's not even close, guys. Beorn has the best feats by an absolute mile. He fought multiple demons throughout the Heresy, including the standout moment of single-handedly slaying a greater demon of Khorne. It's the kind of feat that would get your name sung on Fenris for 10,000 years. Beorn survives the Heresy and continues fighting throughout the Scouring and becomes one of the legendary warriors in all of Space Wolf history, eventually being interned in a dreadnought sarcophagus and still slaps around heretics 10 millennia later. But let's break down the other contenders to truly show I'm not a crazy cow. Othir Weirdmake has some cool moments, I will admit, particularly during the Battle of Prospero. He fights multiple Thousand Sun Psychers and survives most of the battle, but the dude gets absolutely bodied by Ahriman, so that's a hard cap on his resume. Joran Bloodhound is also a solid pick, with feats like surviving the Raising of Prospero and the Alexius Nebula campaign. He was also the original Jarl of the 13th Company and helped them forge a brutal legacy, but once again, no standout duels or monstrous kills to hang his pelt on. And finally, our fourth candidate, Bolvine Greybeard, actually fares a little bit better than the other two. He defeated Iskar Or, a high-ranking Thousand Sun Psyker, in single combat during Prospero, and then he led the 13th Great Company into the Webway in pursuit of the traitors. His story is tragic and badass, but more mythic than demonstrably powerful. When you compare that to Beorn, who's stacking demon-killing feats like trading cards, there's simply no contest. Beorn is the clear undisputed champion of the Space Wolves. He's got the stats, he's got the endurance, he's got the lore, and he's got the demon kills. What more could you ask for? Now, onto my boys in yellow, the Imperial Fists. The 7th Legion, the Imperial Fists, were the defenders of the Imperium. Stone-faced, iron-willed, and utterly unbreakable. Their whole aesthetic screamed, "We will die before we retreat," and they meant it. When the Horus Heresy broke out, Rogel Dorn immediately returned to Terra to fortify the Imperial Palace and prepare for the final battle. The Fists weren't out seeking glory, they were building walls and holding the Imperium's last line. They fought across countless battlefields, but it was at Terra where they earned their place in legend. The Imperial Fists manned the defenses, coordinated the Loyalist forces, and when the walls fell, they were the ones standing in the rubble, still firing, no retreat, no surrender, just pain, duty, and maybe some light screaming. Their Primarch, Rogel Dorn, was the personification of everything the Imperial Fist stood for. Unyielding, stubborn, and so emotionally repressed, he probably thought crying was a form of treason. Dorn was the Emperor's master of fortifications, a tactical genius when it came to defenses, and a brick wall in human form. He built the Imperial Palace's defenses, and then personally stood on those walls when the traitors came. He was cold, loyal, and tragic. A hero who never got the peace he fought for. Rest in peace, my autistic king! No! Sorry about that, I just get really emotional when I bring up Rogel Dorn. So with a legion that led the greatest defense of all time, and a Primarch forged from pure willpower and concrete, who stood out as their champion? Let's look at the best candidates from the 7th Legion, the unbreakable, the relentless, and the few who bled harder than the rest and lived to tell about it. For the Imperial Fists, we're going over 3 potential candidates, but I think you all know who's gonna end up being elected, but we're gonna do it anyway just for fun, guys. Let's introduce our candidates, starting with Fafnir Ran. Ran was a fierce and uncompromising warrior of the Imperial Fist, rising to become Lord Seneschal and commander of the 1st Assault Cadre. Known for wielding twin axes and a massive shield, he first gained prominence at the Battle of Fall, where he held the line aboard the Blade of Perdition. During the Solar War, he commanded the Persephone in the Battle of Pluto under Sigismund's direction. On Terra, Ran led the defense of the Lionsgate spaceport, holding out against waves of traitors led by Karn, Abaddon, and Kroger, whom he would duel and lose to before being saved by Sigismund. He later participated in the desperate defense of the Sanctum Imperialis, fighting against thousands of traitors and even his own allies like Asgalon of the Blood Angels, who had been consumed by the Black Rage. Next, we have the man, the myth, the legend, Sigismund, first captain of the Imperial Fist and the Emperor's champion. Sigismund was a pivotal figure during the Horus Heresy and the Siege of Terra. Initially Dorn's most trusted son, Sigismund struggled with his faith and sense of purpose after learning of Horus's betrayal. Though offered command of the Retribution fleet that would attempt to destroy Horus at Istvan, he instead chose to remain by Dorn's side, a decision that caused a rift between them. During the Solar War, Sigismund led critical battles across Pluto and Mars before returning to the throne world. At Terra, he became a symbol of divine wrath, wielding the Black Sword and defending key positions like the Lion's Gate and Saturn. Our third and final candidate is Camba Diaz, who was the Lord Castellan and a steadfast warrior throughout the Heresy. During the early stages of the war, he led a mission to Mars with Sigismund, tasked with securing key forge complexes and military supplies. Later, Diaz would command the 4th Sphere of Defense, the largest of Dorn's fleets, during the Solar War. When the Siege of Terra finally began, he volunteered to defend the doomed Eternity Wall spaceport. Outnumbered and overwhelmed, Diaz fought until his last breath, dying on his feet while cutting down traitors without ever taking a step back. What a legend. So who deserves to be named champion? I mean, we all know who it is. It's Sigismund, the Black Templar. This is an easy pick. In fact, he's in the running for the strongest legionary of the whole heresy. If Sigismund wasn't in the running here, this race would be a lot closer. Let's touch on Fafnir Ran and Camba Diaz's feats before moving on to Sigismund. First, starting with Fafnir Ran, the 2-axe Chad. Ran fought in multiple engagements throughout the heresy, from Fall to Terra. Ran has 3 significant duels I want to take a look at: Kroger of the Iron Warriors, Sol Terragon of the Wordbearers, and Ascalon of the Blood Angels. He loses to Kroger, who was the runner-up for the 4th Legion. He loses to raged out Ascalon of the Blood Angels, and then he defeats Sol Terragon, who's a captain of the Wordbearers. Sol Terragon isn't much of a feat, but Fafnir does manage to survive throughout the siege. Even as traitors pour into the inner palace, he still fights on. He's not Sigismund, but he's still a really strong candidate. As for Camba Diaz, he has even less feats than the axe wielder, but he has one of the coolest moments in the whole Siege of Terra. As the Eternity Wall spaceport falls, Camba Diaz holds the final crossing into the city against hordes and hordes of traitors, not taking a single step backwards. My king! Yeah, the Imperial Fists are legends. But honestly, both of these guys pale in comparison to Sigismund, the Emperor's champion. Sigismund is literally that guy. And spoilers for the follow-up video, he is arguably the strongest Space Marine during the Horus Heresy. And the craziest thing is this dude is not even a psyker. What the fuck? We're going incredibly deep into this guy's feats, so hold on to your butts. Sigismund kind of evolves over the course of the Crusade and the Heresy, as by the end of it, he is an emotionally void individual who exists solely to enact the Emperor's will. Wielding the Black Blade, he is an absolute monster, but we'll get to that in a second. I'm going to divide Sigismund into 3 parts: Great Crusade Sigismund, Horus Heresy Sigismund, and Siege of Terra Sigismund, which will be the form we are officially looking at. Let's start with Great Crusade Sigismund. Even before the Horus Heresy began, Sigismund was already a legend. When he was inducted as the first captain of the Templars, he had to prove himself the old-fashioned way, by dueling 200 Templars in single combat, one after another with no breaks. That's already an insane feat, but it gets crazier. His final opponent was a Contemptor Dreadnought, and despite being half dead, bleeding out, and on the verge of passing out, Sigismund blitzed the damn thing and took it down. What? This man saw a 12-foot tall murder mech and said, yeah, I can take that mother hecker. Later in the Crusade, he went toe-to-toe with other famed warriors of the era: Jubal Khan of the White Scars, Thos of the Iron Hands, and perhaps most notably, Sevatar of the Night Lords. Sigismund beat all of them except Sevatar, who only won after hours of dueling by pulling an illegal headbutt. Gosh, I hate those. And even that's insane, because Sevatar literally has psychic abilities, including foresight. During the Thramas Crusade, we see Sevatar's point of view in a fight. He can see every move, every feint, every attack before it happens and counters effortlessly. And yeah, Sigismund fought him for hours, specifically from dawn to dusk. Wow. Sigismund during the Great Crusade was already brushing shoulders with the best swordsman in the galaxy, and he wasn't even close to hitting his ceiling. So yeah, if Great Crusade Sigismund was a rising star, then Horus Heresy Sigismund was a solar flare that followed.
No, get those lights off!
After Istvan, Dorn gave him a hit list, purge every traitor in the Sol system, and Sigismund said, bet bro. During the Solar War, aboard his vessel, the frigate Lacrimae, he dueled Horus Aximan, one of the War Master's own Mournival, and cut off his hand, even while wounded. The only reason Aximan lived is because Sigismund got teleported away. Later, he fought beside Dorn aboard the Phalanx, holding the line against demons like Samus before returning to Terra. And here's where we get peak Sigismund. Siege of Terra Sigismund, I feel like, doesn't fully reach his peak until he receives the Black Blade after losing to Karn for the first time. For context, Karn is Khorne's literal golden boy, high on warp juice and unrelenting rage. Once Sigismund receives the Black Blade, he seems to gain a massive power boost and becomes the Emperor's champion. After that, he has a rematch with Karn and he beats the fuck out of him. Not wounded, not beaten, killed. The champion of Khorne gets deleted by a man still made of flesh and bone. That's how terrifying Sigismund becomes. And he's not done. He helps hold the Saturn Wall against the Emperor's children, including Fulgrim, a demon Primarch, who Sigismund doesn't beat, but he holds off for a few seconds. He does get tossed like a ragdoll, but then he gets back up, rallies, and starts dismembering Fulgrim's elite. He even throws Eidolon off the wall like the trash he is. And he keeps going. He racks up a kill count of named Chaos Empowered champions, all of whom had the warp on their side. But it doesn't matter, Chaos cheats and Sigismund still wins. When the Imperial Palace is breached, Sigismund and Fafnir Ran led the survivors through the crumbling palace, personally rescuing Euphrates Keeler and dragging civilians to safety through literal hell. At the Hollow Mountain, when the Astronomicon is housed, he led a final stand alongside Corswain and Cypher, killing dozens of Death Guard warlords in a hopeless battle. But before moving on to the next legion, I just want to talk about the Black Sword, Sigismund's main weapon throughout the Siege of Terra. So what is the Black Sword? The Black Sword isn't just a weapon, it was a relic forged by the Emperor himself, crafted with divine purpose and mystery. Massive, jet black, etched with gold runes, and impossibly heavy, it radiated an eerie, unnatural power. Whispers at the edge of hearing, and a complete absence of reflection, as if it absorbed light and hope. When Sigismund received it on the Emperor's orders, he entered a trance-like state, realizing this was always his burden. From that moment on, he stopped being just the first captain, and became the Emperor's champion. The sword seemed to amplify his already terrifying skills, guiding his wrath like a divine scalpel. With it, he tore through Chaos champions during the Siege of Terra. The thing is, we never get a clear explanation of what the Black Sword really does. It's obvious it changed him, but what did it truly do to him? Before he was elite, after he is unstoppable. It's hard to not think the Emperor Malcador infused it with some kind of psychic or divine power, because going from losing to Karn to erasing him has gotta mean there is something fishy going on with that Black Blade. But yeah, Sigismund is easily the champion of the 7th Legion. On to the Batman of the 8th, the Night Lords.
I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman!
The 8th Legion, the Night Lords, were never heroes, they were a warning. Where other legions brought compliance through diplomacy or open war, the Night Lords ruled by fear. They didn't conquer worlds, they broke them. Every massacre, every crucified governor, every flayed noble was a message. Obey or bleed. Entire star systems surrendered without a shot just to avoid their attention. During the Horus Heresy, the Night Lords didn't fall, they confirmed what everyone already suspected. Their Primarch Conrad Kurz had long since spiraled into madness, haunted by visions of the future where the Imperium devoured itself in tyranny. The Night Lords joined the bloodbath at the Dropside Massacre, hounded the Shattered Legions without mercy, and faced the Dark Angels in a brutal stalemate during the Thramas Crusade, with Kurz personally tormenting Lionel Johnson across multiple engagements. Later, they clashed with the Ultramarines at the Battle of Pharos, trying to cripple Guilliman's effort to reunite the Imperium. Even as the traitors' advance pressed towards Terra, some Night Lords fought their way to the Siege of Terra itself, not out of loyalty to Horus, but for the chance to kill and flay under the dying light of the Imperium. Let's get to their champions though. Obviously, we have Sevatar, first captain of the Night Lords, and honestly one of the sickest characters in 30k. After him we have Malkirion, also known as the War Sage. Thirdly, we have the Painted Count, Jendor Sevrok, and lastly, but not least, Fel Zoras, the Chief Librarian of the Night Lords. Quite the pick of legionaries, but we all know who will be the winner, just like last time. Unless we do have a Psyker in the midst here, so it might be a tougher debate. I know some of you guys are howling at me, where's Talos and Zarl? But in 30k, we don't see them do much, and thus they remain out of the conversation. I apologize. But moving things along, let's start with Malkarian and save the best for last. Malkarian, also known as the War Sage, was captain of the 10th Company of the Night Lords Legion during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. For a legion that breeds cowards, and to put it frankly, pieces of shit, Malkarian is one of the few in his legion that are pure duelist monsters. Malkarian made quite a name for himself during the Siege of Terra, killing 3 champions of the Loyalist legions. Zoramine Khan, Swordmaster Captain of the White Scars 9th Company, Templar Imperial Fist Paladin, Lithandris, and finally, Raquel the Sufferer, Blood Angels Captain of the 7th Company, all in a single day. He would end that day in a dreadnought, but still an incredible feat. After Malkarian, we have the Painted Count, Jendor Sevrok, who truly is a piece of shit and embodies what the Night Lords truly are. After Kur's disappearance, Jendor would wrestle control of the Legion away from Shang, defeating him in single combat. But here's the thing about Jendor, he's actually a pretty lousy swordsman, but where he gets his strength from is his sword itself, which is imbued with a demon, which enhances all of his speed, strength, and just skills overall. He would end up leading the Night Lords on Terra, where he would immediately get bodied by Rolderon, first captain of the Blood Angels, on the walls of Terra. Yeah, kinda lame, but I did want to include him since I feel like folks in the community are absolutely obsessed with him. Now we have our third candidate, Fel Zarost, the Chief Librarian of the Night Lords. Fel Zarost is a pretty damn cool character. A native of Terra, he would serve from the beginning of the Great Crusade and would ultimately get exiled by Sevatar after the Council of Nicaea. He would later then join the Knights Errant and strike out against his former Night Lords, killing traitors for Malcador. After this, he was one of the 8 Knights Errants selected to be the founding members of the Grey Knights. And finally, we have the main man himself, Jago Sevatar, the first captain of the Night Lords and one of the best duelists in 30k. Nostraman born, Jago rose to the ranks of the Night Lords and became renowned throughout the Imperium for his prowess. He would find the Dropsite Massacre and then the Thramas Crusade, where they would battle the Dark Angels for multiple years. Here the Night Lords Legion would shatter as parts would operate independent of each other. Sevatar would ultimately be captured by the Dark Angels and his fate isn't really known. So who's the strongest here? This debate might be even easier than Sigismund. It's Jago Sevatar. Easily. But let's break it down anyways. Sevatar has several impressive feats for someone who's only around the Heresy for the very beginning. First off, Sevatar is one of the greatest duelists in 30k. He wields a fucking chain glaive, which is so cool. Obviously that has no impact on him dueling, but it's still so cool. Come on guys. Points for coolness for sure. The greatest dueling feat we see from him is his fight with Sigismund, which I just discussed, but they duel from literally dusk till dawn, and it's only interrupted by Sevatar headbutting Sigismund in the face, which caused him to technically forfeit. But what does this tell us about Sevatar? It tells us that Sevatar was able to hold his own against Sigismund, who is arguably the greatest duelist in the Imperium at this time. It's hard to say who would have won this fight, but I most likely would argue it was Sigismund, but still a very impressive showing from Sevatar, who was not even using his Psyker abilities during this fight. Ordered by Kurz to repress them, Sevatar is still not really proficient in using them. They in fact actually tend to hurt him as he's actively trying to repress them. His psychic powers are never fully confirmed, but I can guess from the books and the established lore that he can speak to the dead, has slight foresight, and even can use his powers to hurl objects around. But once again, he has hardly mastered these powers. So we have an insanely good duelist with psychic powers, kinda seems broken. Let's see how the other Night Lords hold up against him. Malkarian, first off, is still a great duelist. I mean, killing 3 captains of prowess is pretty impressive, but if we compare Malkarian to Sevatar, Sevatar was able to duel Sigismund on equal footing, and since we don't know the prowess of the 3 loyalist captains, it's pretty easy to assume that Sevatar is the greater duelist. I mean, to go even further, Malkarian got defeated at the end of his dueling streak, so I'd easily give it to Sevatar. But the real question is, how does Sevatar fare against Fel Zorast? Well, funnily enough, the two fought after Sevatar banished him from the Legion. Zorast launched several psychic attacks at the first captain, which would have assuredly killed him if he was any other Space Marine. But Sevatar seemed to tank the blows and then flung Zorast across the room. The literal chief librarian of the Night Lords across the frickin' room. Sevatar shows that even with his powers suppressed, he is still a powerhouse. Maybe even stronger than the chief librarian when it comes to psychic use. Pretty crazy feat. Finally, we come to the painted count, and obviously Sevatar bodies this guy. I mean, the painted count without the demon is literally a little bitch, so once again, I'd easily give it to Sevatar. I mean, we all expected that, right? Right? On to the Blood Angels, the Sons of Sanguinius. Here's where it gets tough.
I know what you are.
Say it. Say it.
Vampire.
Holy shit, guys, I am not kidding. This is a really, really tough one. But let me first introduce them before I start panicking. The 9th Legion, the Blood Angels, were the Golden Sons of the Imperium. Angelic, beautiful, and absolutely terrifying. On the surface, they look like demigods sculpted from marble, all grace and perfection, but underneath, monsters. Noble, tragic monsters. They lived in constant battle with their inner darkness, the infamous Red Thirst, and were only a few heartbeats away from turning into berserk killing machines. Their Primarch, Sanguinius, was the Emperor's brightest star. A literal angel with wings on his back, Sanguinius was beloved by everyone, even his traitor brothers respected him. He was compassionate, wise, and more human than most of the demigods he called brothers. But when it came to war, he was a storm of divine fury. Sanguinius could see the future, and he saw his own death coming. But he still marched forward because duty demanded it. He wasn't just a Primarch, he was a martyr in waiting. During the Horus Heresy, the Blood Angels didn't hide from the horror, they ran straight into it. They held the line at Cygnus Prime, where they were lured into a chaos trap and forced to fight their way through literal hell. Sanguinius faced a greater demon of Khorne in single combat and won, and then faced a greater demon of Slaanesh and won. What a frickin' guy. Then they battered and cursed their way to Terra just in time for the siege. Here, Sanguinius would face Horus aboard the Vengeful Spirit and fulfill his prophecy, dying a hero's death. The 9th would bleed, but they would never break. So who's the champion of the Blood Angels? I have 3 candidates, but I have no idea who the hell I'm going to pick. I'm very curious to see how this one turns out. First, we have Rolderon, who was the Blood Angels' first captain and basically Sanguinius' right hand. Cool-headed, brilliant, and tactically flawless, Rolderon was the shield that defended his legion's honor and the sword that executed its will. If Sanguinius was the heart, Rolderon was the brain, and make no mistake, he could go toe-to-toe with the best warriors in the galaxy and come out on top. Next, we have Nasir Amit, also known as the Flesh Terror. He was the complete opposite, a barely contained storm of bloodlust. Where Rolderon was discipline, Amit was violence. He gave into the Red Thirst more than most and fought like a rabid beast with a chainsword. He was terrifying even to other Astartes, and though he struggled to control his rage, he was loyal to the core and absolutely lethal. And finally, we have our third and final candidate, Azkalan, the commander of the Sanguinian Guard. Sanguinius' personal protectors. Regal, silent, and utterly devoted, Azkalan embodied everything noble about the 9th Legion. He wasn't just a bodyguard, he was a living symbol of the Legion's ideals. But when it came down to it, he would carve through traitor champions like a buzzsaw. Let me tell you guys, all 3 of these fellas are monsters in combat. I feel like if I put any of them over the other 2, I will get my butt cooked. But try we must. Let's start with Rolderon. Besides having some of the best one-liners in the series, yeah, get fucked painted count, Rolderon brings some serious feats to the table. He's consistently ranked among the greatest duelists of the 30th millennium, up there with legends like Abaddon, Jubal Khan, and Sigismund. A veteran from the very start of the Great Crusade, Rolderon not only survived the Heresy, but went on to lead the Blood Angels as chapter master after Sanguinius' death. Combat-wise, Rolderon fought in numerous major engagements. At Cygnus Prime, he survived the Blood Angels' first clash with Chaos, a massive trap sprung by Horus, and that absolute cunt Erebus. From there he journeyed with Sanguinius to Ultramar and then later helped the Angel carve a bloody path back to Terra. During the siege, he commanded the Helios Gate and repelled multiple traitor assaults. Later, fighting alongside Valdor and the Khan, defending the Colossi Gate against overwhelming demonic and Death Guard forces. He survived all the way to the final push aboard the Vengeful Spirit, which, well, you kinda know how that one went, guys. As for notable duels, Rolderon's most significant is against the painted Count of the Night Lords. While possessed by a demon, the Count holds the upper hand, but once the demon abandons him, Rolderon disarms him, throws him down, and shouts, "Get off my wall." What an absolute legend. While this shows Rolderon's struggles against fully possessed Marines, it's still a solid feat, especially since the Count had previously beaten Shang, the equerry of Conrad Kurz. It does suggest that Rolderon sits below the likes of Sigismund, who is out there deleting warped amp champions left and right, but it's not a disqualifier. Rolderon is shown throughout the siege, mowing down Chaos Marines with ease and holding the line even as the palace falls. By the end, he's still standing, one of only 500 Blood Angels left alive. So yeah, maybe not on Sigismund's level, but Rolderon's record shows elite dueling skills, high-level leadership, and relentless endurance from start to finish. Before we go into the next two, let's talk about the Black Rage and the Red Thirst. Two genetic flaws that turn the Blood Angels into absolute monsters. Both seem to massively boost a warrior's strength, speed, and fury, with examples across the Siege of Terra, where affected Blood Angels slaughtered hundreds of traitors and loyalists. I won't go too deep into comparing buffs across legions, but it's important to note that all three of our contenders, Rolderon, Azkalan, and Nasir Ahmet, gave into the rage during the siege and went absolutely feral. Rolderon was on the Vengeful Spirit when the Black Rage erupted and still managed to launch himself at both the Justeri Terminators fighting him and the Custody Guards fighting alongside the Blood Angels. He survived, killing several in his fury. That alone is a huge feat. So how does Commander Azkalan stack up? Like Rolderon, he's a survivor of the Great Crusade, Horus Heresy, and the Siege of Terra, which already puts him in elite company. He was wounded by Conrad Kurz during the Imperium Secundus arc, defending Sanguinius' throne room when the Night Haunter tore his arm off. Azkalan has two major duels we can discuss. First, with Lucius the Eternal. They fought in a friendly duel during the Great Crusade, and while they were even for a time, Lucius drew first blood and technically won. Azkalan then tackled him and threw him off the boat they were fighting on, but let's be honest, Lucius won that fight, and in a real fight to the death, he likely still would. That puts Azkalan below Lucius. The second duel I want to look at is Wild. During the final stand in the Imperial Palace after Sanguinius' death, the Black Rage takes hold of the Blood Angels. Azkalan completely loses it and turns on everyone, including Fafnir Ran. Their fight is brutally one-sided. Ran can only defend himself as Azkalan overpowers him. Ran only survives because a wave of traitors shows up and Azkalan turns on them instead. It's a terrifying display of what the Black Rage can do. Now, we come to Nasir Ahmet, the Flesh Terror, another absolute legend with killer one-liners. He too survives the Great Crusade, Heresy, and Siege, which already says a lot. During the Great Crusade, he gained fame by fighting in the World Eater Gladiator pits alongside Cargo's Bloodspitter. He even fought Karn the Betrayer, and they drew. Now that's pre-Khorne Blessed Karn, so not peak Karn, but still a solid feat. Ahmet's real rampage begins at Cygnus Prime, where he gives into the Red Thirst and slaughters a pack of Space Wolves. From there, he fights at Better Garmon, leads brutal assaults, and racks up a heinous amount of kills. Then comes the Siege of Terra. Not only does he hold the palace and slay hundreds of traitors, but he also gets two rematches with Cargos Bloodspitter, his former brother. And Ahmet, let me tell you, wrecks him both times. Chaos saves Bloodspitter from death, but we get one of the best lines in the siege. "Too slow, Bloodspitter. Too damn slow," said Nasir Ahmet. "Ahmet, my brother," said Bloodspitter. "Eat shit, traitor." Absolutely savage. Ahmet would later fully give into the Black Rage, murdering hundreds of loyalists and traitors and piling their bodies into a literal mound of corpses before coming back to his senses. So yeah, every one of these guys goes full monster mode when the flaws take over, and it's clear the Blood Angels become nearly unstoppable when they do. But now comes the question, who is the true champion of the 9th Legion? Why is this so hard, guys? Well, I can only pick one, so let's compare again. All three have slaughtered traitors by the dozens, but who doesn't have the greatest feats here? Let's start with Rolderon. He held his own against the Painted Count, who was slicing through Blood Angels like butter with a demon-possessed sword. Rolderon stood his ground until the demon bailed, and then wrecked him. That's a serious feat. Amit fought both Karn and Kargos, two respected duelists. He beat Kargos twice and drew with pre-Khorne Karn. That's before Karn hit God Mode, but still, drawing with him is no joke. Kargos, meanwhile, was a gladiatorial monster even before corruption, undefeated in the World Eater fighting pits. Azkalan fought Fafnir Ran and Lucius. He lost to Lucius the Eternal, which is fair enough because Lucius is a frickin' freak, and nearly overwhelmed Ran during the Black Rage. But if it weren't for traitor interference, he might have killed Ran. Still, compared to the other two, Azkalan just doesn't have that killer feat that puts him over the top. With great pain, I'm eliminating Azkalan. Sorry, golden boy. You're sick, just not the sickest. So it comes down to Rolderon versus Nasir Amit. Here's the tiebreaker. How strong were their opponents? Kargos was a chaos-enhanced pit fighter, and Amit easily beat him twice. Karn, even in his base form, had a growing reputation as a butcherer during the Great Crusade, and then later effortlessly killed Erebus. So defeating Kargos and drawing with Karn, that's some serious feats right there. Now, the Painted Count. Demon boosted, he annihilated Shang, who was also no slouch, and even escaped the Nightfall prison labyrinth, a place that trapped not one, but two Primarchs at separate times. Not saying he's Primarched here, but the Demon Blade gave him some crazy buffs. A second awareness, insane speed, and a near unparalleled precision. Rolderon keeping pace with him, that's huge. And let's not forget, he's said to be one of the Imperium's greatest duelists. You know I hate hearsay, but that one's hard to deny. So what's the verdict? On one hand, you've got Rolderon, an elite swordsman with a resume to match. On the other hand, you've got Nasir Amit, Mr. Flesh Terror himself, casually destroying traitors and dropping some of the coldest one-liners in the siege. And on the third hand, you've got me, staring at a wall, contemplating flipping a coin because I've been debating this for 4 goddamn hours. Guys, I really don't know who I'm gonna pick here. I think I'm screwed. I think the Blood Angels are gonna break into my house, grab me, and milk me dry. Uh-oh.
Get on with it. Yes, get on with it!
Alright, I'll get on with it. Rolderon's greatest feat is holding his own for a time against a demon-possessed blade. In the Black Rage, his biggest moment is cutting through Sons of Horus Terminators during the siege. Solid stuff, but limited in what we actually see. Nasir Amit, his greatest feat in baseline form is drawing with base Karn. And in the Black Rage, he literally creates a mound of dead traitors and loyalists. Both of them fight corrupted Marines throughout the siege, so to finally settle this, we have to look at their significant one-on-one duels. So after much deliberation and intense debates with my invisible friends, I've decided the champion of the Blood Angels is Nasir Amit. Please, 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 please don't kill me in the comments. I really wanted to pick Rolderon, I really did. But Nasir drew with Karn. That's Karn, guys. The same guy who with a little chaos juice later defeats Sigismund. Arguably the strongest duelist of the entire 30k era. And remember, Sigismund beat Jubal Khan and drew with Sevatar. So Karn being that high tier makes Nasir's draw a massive deal. Now yes, Rolderon is heavily respected. He's regarded as one of the Imperium's greatest duelists, but his one major duel against the Painted Count, he only wins after the demon bails. That's still impressive, but not quite enough to top Amit beating Kargos twice, even while Kargos was cutting down loyalists left and right, and tying with pre-Khorne Karn. I know I'm going to catch hell for this, but I'm trying to be fair. Like with Horus, who I ranked at number 12 in my Primarch rankings, because there just wasn't enough to put him higher. Same deal here, Amit tying with Karn is a massive feat, and in my opinion, puts the Flesh Terror ahead of the first captain. However, just like I did with Jubal Khan, I'll be including Rolderon in the next round, cause it was just that close. Now, on to the stupid flesh haters of the Iron Hands. The 10th Legion, the Iron Hands, were less a legion and more a walking hate crime against weakness. Cold, ruthless, and obsessed with replacing flesh with metal, the Iron Hands believed emotion was a flaw and mercy was just inefficient programming. Their Primarch, Ferrus Manus, was just as relenting. Known as a Gorgon, Ferrus had silver hands of living metal and a forge for a heart. He believed strength was everything, that only through remorseless will and brutal innovation could humanity survive. While he was brilliant, he was also inflexible to the point of self-destruction. He hated weakness so much he couldn't see it in himself, which made his death at the hands of his former brother Fulgrim during the Dropside Massacre all the more tragic. During the Heresy, the Iron Hands got hit hard and fast. They were nearly shattered at Isstvan 5, where Ferrus was killed, but the survivors didn't break, they hardened. The Legion fractured into warbands, each one waging a one-man crusade of revenge across the galaxy. Before we start naming candidates, I just want to say, these guys stink. I legit could not think of anyone off the top of my head that could qualify for champion of the Iron Hands. I know you guys are like, wait, what about Gabriel Santar, first captain of the Iron Hands? Okay guys, this dude loses to motherfucking Julius Caesaron, not once, but twice, and then dies in the book he's introduced in. Wow, what a great character. There's nothing to even discuss there. He does nothing. There's also the fact that Ferrus Manus, the Headless Oner, didn't like Psykers either. So there's no Psykers in the whole Legion we can even take a look at. And then there's also the fact that most of their Legion dies at Isstvan. So who the fuck do we even have to debate here? It's just a screwed situation, because I have the same problem with the Raven Guard and the Salamanders, as there are simply no named characters to really debate. It's a barren wasteland for the Shattered Legions. For potential Iron Hand candidates, I have a few in mind. So after doing way too much research, I've narrowed down the Iron Hand's potential champions to 4 candidates: Autek Mor, Shadrach Medusan, Bion Henricos, and Thos. Yes, this frickin' sucks. I like Medusan, but come on. Rolderon doesn't get a spot, but this dude does? Yeah, this hurts my soul. Autek Mor was a respected duelist before the Heresy, respected enough to kill several of his own Legion and Honor duels. Instead of playing hit and run like Medusan, Mor went scorched earth, launching massive assaults on traitor worlds, including Bolt, the World Eater's main recruitment planet. And that's pretty much all we get from him. He survives the Heresy and becomes the first chapter master of the Red Talons, which means he's got durability and survivability. But individual feats? Nowhere to be seen. After him is Shadrach Medusan. He survives the Dropside Massacre and kicks off a major guerrilla campaign, leading the largest force of Shattered Legion remnants. He's basically a professional thorn in the traitor's side for years, until he gets ambushed and killed by Tibal Mar. His main feat? Survivability? That's kinda it. Sorry Iron Hand fans, all 12 of you losers out there. Third, we have Bion Henricos. Who? Exactly. I had to dig really deep for this guy. He duels Horus Axeman and holds his own for a bit, then more sons of Horus show up and Axeman stabs him in the back. That's it. Pretty depressing. And finally, we have Thos of the Fell Clan. He shows up once, literally once in the whole 40K timeline. It's in the Sigismund Eternal Crusader novel, and he duels Sigismund. That's it. That's his only appearance, that's his only feat. But here's the thing about that, Thos holds his own in that fight. It's a pretty long duel, and he ultimately loses, because of course it's Sigismund, but for a total no-name Iron Hand to go toe-to-toe with the Black Sword himself, that's easily more impressive than anything the other 3 bring to the table. So yeah, against all odds and all my instincts, I'm picking Thos as the Iron Hand's champion. It feels really wrong, deeply existentially wrong, but facts are facts I guess. Dueling Sigismund and not getting instantly vaporized puts him ahead of the others. I apologize to all 6 of you Iron Hand fans, maybe Ferrus Manus will come back and give you a hug. Oh yeah, wait. He's dead. Bummer. The 12th Legion, the World Eaters, were less an army and more a raging monstrosity, war incarnate. Enhanced by the brutal butcher's nails, they were driven into perpetual bloodlust, lusting for violence above all else. Their doctrine, not conquest, not honor, just pure unrelenting slaughter. Their Primarch Angron was a tragedy and terror made flesh. A gladiator enslaved on Nucera, he was forced into brutal combat and driven insane by cybernetic implants called the Butcher Nails.
That's rough, buddy.
Brought into the Imperium by the Emperor himself, Angron never belonged, and when Horus struck, he was the first to join, believing blood and anger to be the only truths. Once he fell, the nails of his legion spread his fury, and the 12 transformed into worshippers of Khorne. During the Horus Heresy, the World Eaters were unleashed at Isstvan III, the Dropside Massacre, they raided across Ultramar during the Shadow Crusade, and then finally they fought at the Siege of Terra. They smashed through Loyalist defenses with berserk ferocity, leaving only horror and desecration in their wake. I imagine everyone and their mom thinks Kharn is going to be the champion. Well, hold on to your pants a little, Timmy, because the World Eaters have some heavy hitters outside of Khorne's favorite boy. Let's dive into them. And no, we're not starting with Kharn. Where's the fun in that? First up, Delvarus. Delvarus began as a centurion of the 44th Company Triarii and the World Eaters and earned a name as an absolute beast in the pit fighting arenas. Fun fact, when paired with Sigismund, the two would win every first blood match in under 30 seconds. That's pretty crazy. He survived the Genna massacre, holding his ground as the rest of his squad was wiped out, and led elite boarding operations aboard the Conqueror, the World Eaters' flagship. Delvarus also had an issue with following orders, constantly going rogue and making unauthorized drop assaults that nearly doomed the Conqueror. His punishment, 26 sanctioned pit duels. He won them all until he finally lost to Apothecary Cargos Bloodspitter, who spared his life. Later in the Heresy, Delvarus would become a possessed Marine, eventually leading his own warband, the Riven. Now, let's move on to the man who beat him, Cargos Bloodspitter, Apothecary of the World Eaters' 8th Company. Cargos earned his name by literally spitting blood into his opponent's eyes during the pit fights aboard the Conqueror. A savage duelist, he formed a brutal bond with Blood Angels captain Nasir Amit, fighting alongside him in the pits, witnessed by Angron and Sanguinius themselves. During the Heresy, Cargos fought at Isstvan III, patched up Kharn after near death, and by the Siege of Terra, had descended into madness. After Kharn's defeat, he picked up Gorechild and faced down loyalists like Amit at the Eternity Gate. Then there's the lesser known, but absolutely terrifying, Endrid Har, the Rivenhound. A towering world eater who never took the butcher's nails. Har likely predates Astartes' augmentation and may even be a former Thunder Warrior. When the Heresy broke out, he rejected his legion, escaped captivity, and formed the Fangs of the Emperor, a Black Shield warband hell-bent on killing Horus. He led relentless raids across Beta Garmon, and during the Siege of Terra, took part in the Saturn defense. Har's greatest feat saw him slay multiple Justiri Terminators and even took 7 killing blows from Abaddon before finally falling. And if Abaddon hadn't teleported away, Nathaniel Gara was about to finish him off. The Rivenhound is an absolute tank of a warrior. And finally, our fourth and last candidate is the obvious one, Kharn the Betrayer, Khorne's favorite son. Kharn began as a brilliant, if unstable, captain and became Angron's equerry. After surviving the first implantation of the Butcher's Nails, during the Great Crusade and early Heresy, he built his name as an unmatched duelist and warrior. At Isstvan III, the Shadow Crusade, and later the Siege of Terra, Kharn was everywhere, leading assaults alongside Abaddon, Kroger, and Zardu Layak, and dueling major loyalist champions like Sigismund. So who gets the crown here? We have some great Space Marines to pick from. 3 traitors and 1 loyalist. Let's go through each of their feats and compare them. Once again, starting with Delvarus. Delvarus was a master of boarding actions, but as we all know, World Eaters aren't exactly known for their strategy. So as I stated earlier, Delvarus was punished and had to fight 26 consecutive pit duels. He did win every single one of them until he finally fell to Cargos, but by then he was totally gassed. He was also Sigismund's tag team partner in the Gladiator pits, and together they won every bout in under 30 seconds. Those are the only real feats we get, but they're really no joke. Delvaris is easily one of the best pure duelists from the World Eaters, and he even gets a bigger power boost later in the Heresy when he gets possessed. On to Kargos. Kargos Bloodspitter is a similar beast. A renowned pit fighter, Kargos teamed up with Nasir Amit, and together they never tasted defeat. During the Siege of Terra, he picked up Gorechild after Karn fell and fought Amit twice, losing both times. He's essentially Delvaris light, and it's even mentioned in Betrayer that he's never been able to beat him in combat. And I'm not really counting his victory over Delvaris after Delvaris had fought 26 straight fights. So why is he even on the list? I really don't know, guys. I think I just wanted to justify putting Nasir Amit as the Blood Angels champion probably. So thanks for the assist, Kargos. Next, we've got a loyalist world eater, Endrid Har, the Riven Hound, which if you haven't noticed is one of the coolest names in the setting. Rumored to be a literal Thunder Warrior, Har never received the Butcher's Nails, and since he's rumored to be a Thunder Warrior, he should be freakishly strong and fast even amongst his Astartes. Har's greatest feat outside of slaying traitors takes place during the ambush under the Saturn Gate. Fighting the kill teams met to ambush the Sons of Horus companies drilling underneath the gate, he would face down against Abaddon after slaying several Terminators. I will say the Riven Hound wasn't fighting alone, as he was alongside Selbestus, a paladin of the Blood Angels, and Nathaniel Garo of the Death Guard, which makes Har's fight with Abaddon a little bit less notable, but Abaddon is alongside the likes of Sigismund in terms of power. Calm down guys, I'm not talking about Siege of Terra Sigismund, more Great Crusade Sigismund. So Har tanks 7 killing blows from Abaddon before finally going down. Finally, we get to Karn the Betrayer, Khorne's golden boy. Karn has two distinct forms I want to look at, Base Karn and Khorne Chosen Karn. We're breaking both down, starting with Base Karn. This is Great Crusade to Nasera Karn, before the full-on corruption takes hold. He's got a trail of broken champions behind him, but a few major duels stand out. First, his draw with Nasir Amit. A pretty damn good showing, since Nasir, in my completely unbiased opinion, is the strongest Blood Angel in 30k. Nasir went on to kill hordes of traitors and Kargos twice. Second, Karn absolutely annihilates Erebus, and no, Erebus isn't even a pushover. He beat both Loken and Horus Axeman in duels, and even survived a stint in the World Eater pits, until Karn wiped the floor with him. Does Get Up ring any bells, guys? And now, we get to Corrupted Karn. Now juiced up on Khorne's blessings, Karn becomes one of the most terrifying Marines in 30k. During the Siege of Terra, he leaps dozens of feet in the air, punches through tanks, and has the speed and strength that surpasses just about anyone, except maybe Psychers, and even that's debatable. At the Lionsgate spaceport, he duels Sigismund, and while Siggy is the better technical fighter, Karn just simply overpowers him. He wins, only prevented by landing the killing blow by Rugaldorn himself, who swats Karn away at the last second. Later, Karn slaughters his way through the Eternity Gate, even killing Janetta Kroll, the Lord Commander of the Sisters of Silence, without even realizing it, which is pretty weird, but whatever I guess. His final feat is the second duel with Sigismund. This is peak Sigismund wielding the Black Blade, having already cut down multiple traitor champions. And guess what? Karn gives him the best fight yet. But ultimately, Sigismund wins and Karn dies in the ruins of the palace. Still, the fact that he went toe-to-toe with that version of Sigismund tells you everything you need to know about it. So yeah, I tried to gaslight you guys into thinking it might not be him, but let's be real, Karn is the champion of the World Eaters. No one else on this list even comes close in terms of feats, raw power, or sheer carnage. Karn takes the crown as the Eater of Worlds. Now, let's move on to the Blueberry Boys, the Ultramarines. The 13th Legion, the Ultramarines, were the epitome of discipline excellence in the Great Crusade, a fusion of tactical genius and near-fanatical devotion to the Emperor's ideals. Where other legions rode the tide of emotion and fury, the Ultramarines were architects of perfection, turning war into calculated science. Their fortress world, Macragge, stood as a testament to order amid chaos, and their ranks were filled with warriors trained to think, adapt, and overcome. Their Primarch, Rebute Guilliman, was the embodiment of this balance, a brilliant strategist, a calm leader, and a battlefield commander all in one. When the Heresy broke out, Guilliman's leadership was put to the test at the Battle of Calth, where the Ultramarines were ambushed by the Word Bearers. Despite overwhelming odds and devastating losses, he rallied his legion and they fought back the traitors. After this, they would defend the 500 worlds during the brutal Shadow Crusade, which would ultimately result in the Ruinstorm cutting off Ultramar from the rest of the galaxy. For the remainder of the Heresy, the Ultramarines were rebuilt and then led by Guilliman would attempt to return to Terra to save the besieged loyalists. Although they would return too late, they would reap a vicious tally on the remaining traitors. So who's the Ultramarines champion during the Horus Heresy? Honestly, I have no frickin' idea, guys, and that's kind of the problem. The Ultramarines spent most of the Heresy sidelined, trapped behind the Ruinstorm, missing out on major battles like Istavan, Fall, Better-Garmon, Pluto, and even Terra. That means we don't get the flashy one-on-one duels or tragic last stands that the other legions gave us. Additionally, the Ultramarines were built for unity, doctrine, and overwhelming force, not for solo theatrics. That makes choosing a single champion damn near impossible. Now some names rise to the top. Marius Gage, for instance, first master of the Ultramarines, a tactical prodigy and one of Guilliman's most trusted commanders, but let's be real, his Heresy era feats are pretty underwhelming. He literally loses his hand to a demon in the opening minutes of the Battle of Calth. Not exactly peak champion material. So I've dug through what I could find. These are the best contenders we've got. You may disagree, and honestly, same, but someone's gotta wear the crown, even if it's more of a laurel wreath. Let's dive into the Blue Boys and see who might stand atop the rest. First up is Aenid Thiel, a sergeant of the 13th Company of the Ultramarines. Thiel was a bold and unconventional thinker whose tactical brilliance and battlefield ferocity makes him a standout candidate during the Battle of Calth. Originally censored for his unorthodox methods, he led a heroic counterattack aboard the Macragge's Honor, turning his red helmet marking into a symbol of honor. Afterwards, he rejoined the surface battle on Calth and remained there for years, eventually becoming the head of Guilliman's bodyguard and joining him during the final push towards Terra. Thiel's most notable feat is slaying multiple demons and traitor marines during the excursion on Macragge's Honor. Unfortunately, that's kind of where his highlights stop. He's briefly seen investigating an Alpha Legion incursion on Lax, but he doesn't get to flex much and even loses to a traitor Psyker Marine. After that, Thiel fades into the background and only reappears alongside Guilliman at the end of the Heresy. Our next candidate is Ecos Lamida, one of the 4 Tetrarchs of the Ultramar system and Rebute Guilliman's personal champion. Ecos, at one point during the Great Crusade, was nearly killed defending Bathor, taking a brutal wound from an Eldar Shrieker round that cost him an eye and a large chunk of his skull. Everyone assumed he'd be turned into a dreadnought, but the Mechanicum of Connor rebuilt him, augmenting him heavily without going that far. Ecos would fight at the Battle of Calth and later joined Guilliman's march to Terra, but honestly, most of his reputation is built on hearsay. The one and only juicy feat he has is dueling Abaddon after the Battle of Ulanor, where Ecos actually defeated him in single combat, which is pretty wild, I'm not gonna lie. Abaddon is easily one of the most dangerous duelists of the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. He defeats several top tier loyalists like Jubal Khan, Enir Har, Bel Sepsis, and even Garvio Loken. Now it's worth noting that this version of Abaddon Ecos fought was still in his base form, not the chaos boosted monster he'd later become, but still, beating him is no joke. Following him is our third candidate, Leggett Orphe Cassander, who led the Ultramarine forces on Armature and fought with the precision of a master swordsman. His legendary moment, dueling Karn and actually gaining the upper hand, until Angron showed up and interrupted the fight. Yep, Orphe was holding his own in the heart of the World Eater's madness, showing he's no slouch when it comes to raw dueling skill. That said, this is the only real appearance we get from him, and his only real feat is that one duel. Also, Karn was using a power sword instead of his usual axe, which could have been a factor, but let's not downplay it. Not getting instantly shredded by Karn, let alone pushing him back, is seriously impressive. Orphe might be a one-hit wonder, but it's a damn good hit. Our fourth candidate is Tylos Rubio, one of the rare Ultramarine Psychers who kept his powers hidden after Nikeah and then later joined the Knights Errant under Malcador. During the Battle of Calth, Tylos finally unleashed his powers, collapsing tunnels, killing world bearers, and saving his fellow Ultramarines in the process. Later, he fought a newly reawakened Garvio Loken, holding his own against the emotionally unstable and insane former Luna Wolf. That wasn't a win, but it showed that Rubio could hang with the heavy hitters. He also helped infiltrate the Vengeful Spirit, where he battled the demon Tormageddon, but unfortunately got defeated and heavily wounded. It gets worse though for Tylos. A chaos ritual brainwashed him and he ended up trying to assassinate Malcador. Yeah, not a great arc for Rubio. A strong psyker, definitely champion material. Pretty debatable. And finally, we have our last candidate, Captain Remus Ventalis, who led the embattled 4th Company during the Wordbearer's ambush on Calth. He rallied shattered forces, secured the planetary defense grid, and led a grueling campaign in the Underworld War, earning him the title Savior of Calth. Remus later contributed to refining Gilman's Codex Astartes, making him a hero both on and off the battlefield. Like Thiel though, most of his feats come from fighting traitor Marines during the Calth campaign. But one major standout is his defeat of the corrupted Dark Apostle, Malak Cartho, in single combat. It's a solid accomplishment that proves that Remus wasn't just a leader, he was a frontline warrior with serious strength. Still, much like Thiel, his resume is built on slaying traitor Marines. So who the fuck is the champion here? Let's break it down by debating each Ultramarine's most significant feat and start by trimming the fat. As much as I love Thiel, all he really does is slay a mix of traitor Marines and demons, which let me tell you doesn't make him weak, far from it, but it's not enough to convince me that he's the strongest Ultramarine. Next to go, Remus Ventalis. Again, awesome character, love the guy, but like Thiel, his standout moment is taking down a Chaos Warlock in combat. Impressive, sure, but that Warlock doesn't even die, he actually ascends to demonhood. So, way to go, Remus? But here's where it gets tough. We've got a Psyker and 2 absolute duelist monsters, so who's getting cut next? As much as I respect Tylos Rubio, he's out. He's a solid Psyker, no doubt, but he doesn't actually defeat anyone of major note. At the Battle of Calth, he takes out some Wordbearer Terminators by collapsing the tunnels around him. It's clever, yeah, but it's more about environmental awareness than overwhelming psychic might. You get what I'm saying? And later, he gets absolutely wrecked by the demon Tormageddon. A demon who, by the way, Loken ends up killing during the Siege of Terra. That's rough, buddy. So when you stack that against Ecos Lamida, beating Abaddon, or Orphe Cassander holding his own against Karn, Tylos is clearly outclassed. Now we're down to the final 2, Ecos and Orphe, both basically defined by a single duel, but those duels are big. So here's the real question, who's stronger, Abaddon or Karn? I know this might rattle some World Eater fans, but I gotta say, base Abaddon is definitely stronger than base Karn, especially at the time of these duels. And the fact that Ecos can beat Abaddon in under 30 seconds? Yeah, that seals it. Ecos Lamida is the strongest Ultramarine Space Marine of the Horus Heresy. That one was close, but I think the facts back it up, or at least I hope they do. Please don't kill me, guys. Now, onto the smelly fart boys of the Death Guard. Good God, they stink. The 14th Legion, the Death Guard, were never dramatic conquerors, they were slow, inevitable decay that consumed everything. Hardened by the toxic planet Barbarous and transformed under Primarch Mortarion, they became masters of attrition, plague warfare, and unbreakable dread. Where others sought glory, the Death Guard marched forward, dripping in corruption, immune to pain, disease, and fear. Their Primarch Mortarion was a man shaped by poison and shadow. Born in the deadly fogs of Barbarous, he survived horrors that would break any soul and lead villagers in rebellion. Clad in plague-worn Terminator armor and wielding a monstrous scythe, he became a force of nature, unyielding, implacable, and terrifying. Under his command, his legion fought with ruthless efficiency across the Great Crusade. But during the Heresy, the Death Guard's true transformation began. Betrayal at Istvan III, entrapment in the Warp, and a horrific plague, culminated in a pact with Nurgle. They embraced disease, decay, not as a curse, but as power. By Terra's siege, the Death Guard had become walking, rotting nightmares, immune to pain, weaponized in plague, and unstoppable in the horror they spread. The Death Guard don't get a lot of love during the Heresy, so it's hard to find standout warriors. But damn, the few we do have are killers. I only found 2 notable candidates, but trust me, they're both absolute beasts in their own right. Let's start with Typhus the Traveler, who was Mortarion's ruthless first captain, the mastermind behind the Death Guard's betrayal and their eventual fall to Nurgle. By killing all the Legion's astropaths, Typhus left the fleet becalmed in the warp while they were traveling to Terra. They were slowly overtaken by Nurgle's corruption, and he personally absorbed the Destroyer Plague, becoming Nurgle's chosen herald. From that point on, Typhus became the walking embodiment of disease, mastering psychic powers, summoning demons, and even leading the assault against the Astronomicon during the siege. Typhus is unique in that he's the host of the Destroyer Plague, which is an absolutely disgusting and terrifying warp-borne disease. The plague manifests as swarms of sentient warp-spawn flies that infest every orifice of the body and lay eggs inside their victims. Those infected bloat, pop like balloons, and release even more plague flies. It's one of Nurgle's vilest creations. Unfortunately, we don't get to see the Destroyer Plague in action very often because the Death Guard were kinda sidelined in the lore. No, really, they only got one book dedicated to them in the entire 54-book Horus Heresy series. Wild. But in that one book, Buried Dagger, Typhus does throw down with Mortarion himself. After betraying the Legion, Morty tries to kill him and Typhus actually holds his own for a while, using psychic powers before Mortarion finally puts him down. But thanks to his bond with the Destroyer Plague, Typhus just kinda gets back up. Instantly. Dude's basically immortal. Later during the Siege of Terra, he duels and defeats Sahariel, one of the Dark Angel candidates we covered earlier. So we know Typhus has serious psychic powers, sickening resilience, and duelist skills to back it all up. Now, let's talk about the loyalist Death Guard candidate and one of the greatest bald badasses of all time, Nathaniel Garro. Garro is the literal GOAT. After escaping Horus's betrayal aboard the Einstein, he becomes Malkador's first knight's errand, hunting down potential recruits and fighting traitors and demons across the war-torn Imperium. He's a veteran of the entire Great Crusade, a survivor of 100 of campaigns, and a cold-blooded killer of demons. Among his greatest feats, killing the Lord of Flies on Luna, defeating Falcus Kyber of the Sons of Horus under the Saturn Gate, and most importantly, fighting his own Primarch. That's right. Garro fought Demon Primarch Mortarion and stabbed him in the neck, not once, but twice. Now to be fair, he did have a little help from Euphrates Keeler, who empowered him with the Emperor's Light, a divine psychic buff that basically turned him into a glowing holy avenger. But still, charging a literal demon Primarch and shanking him twice? That's nuts. Eventually, Mortarion killed Garro, but not before getting turned into a Mortarion kebab.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
That one didn't really work as well as I thought it would. Frick. It's one of the most metal final acts in all of the Heresy. So who takes the crown here? It's tough, really tough, but in the end, I have to give it to Typhus the Traveler, by the slimmest of margins. Both of these warriors faced down their own Primarchs, an accomplishment in itself. Garro, blazing with the Emperor's Light, managed to wound Mortarion twice in a final glorious act of defiance. But Typhus fought Mortarion, died, and got right back up like it was a frickin' Tuesday. He didn't just survive, he endured. Backed by the Destroyer Plague, empowered by the Warp, and unkillable in the most horrific way possible. Typhus is simply harder to stop, so as Nurgle's herald and host of the Destroyer Plague, Typhus takes the crown as the Death Guard's deadliest. But Garro, oh, he's not done. His feats, his loyalty, and his narrative weight are just too good to ignore. He's earned a spot in the next round as a wild card, joining the razor close runner-ups, Jubal Khan of the White Scars, and Rolderon of the Blood Angels. Now strap in, because we finally arrived at the space nerds of the 1,000 Suns. Wait, what's that I hear in the distance? Oh yeah, Magnus did nothing wrong! The 15th Legion, the 1,000 Suns, were never your typical conquerors. They were the relentless pursuit of knowledge made lethal. Forged on the ancient world of Prospero, shaped under their Primarch Magnus the Red, they became masters of psychic warfare, arcane lore, and intellectual supremacy. Where other legions claimed territory, the 1,000 Suns claimed truth, bending reality itself to study and understand the warp. Their Primarch, Magnus the Red, was a miracle of intellect and power. Born a prodigy among the sorcerers of Prospero, he rose to be the most powerful psyker in the Imperium. Shrouded in the crimson robes of his craft and crowned with horns of raw warp energy, Magnus wielded his forbidden might to reshape galaxies, to predict the future, and to defend his people. His legion didn't just storm worlds, they wielded magic that rewrote the laws of physics. But during the Horus Heresy, their greatest gift became their downfall. Magnus' psychic attempts to warn the Emperor about Horus shattered the Webway and exposed them to ruin. Tragically born of curiosity and loyalty, that curse sealed their fate. Prospero was obliterated and Magnus fell to Tzeentch. By Terra's siege, the 1,000 Suns had fallen from grace and now were corrupted by chaos. The 1,000 Suns don't get as many named legendary champions early in the Heresy, but as the story unfolds, especially closer to the siege, they start stacking up a bunch of ridiculously powerful contenders. And since they're one of my favorite legions, yeah, we're going deep on this one. From duelist psychers to reality warping sorcerers, these nerds are absurd. Quick shout out to my boy Amon, equerry of Magnus. Sadly, he doesn't make the cut. I know guys, I know. 1,000 Sun fans, I'm sorry, he just doesn't have enough feats during the Heresy to realistically make him a top tier candidate. Love the guy, but no dice. And honestly, kind of ironically, the 1,000 Suns suffer the same fate as the Space Wolves. They were nearly wiped out at Prospero, and only a handful of their Space Marines make it to the Siege of Terra. That really limits our pool for picking a champion. That said, let's dig into the best of the 15th Legion. First up is Sanacht, a master swordsman with powerful telepathy. He could read his opponent's thoughts mid-fight. Yeah, good luck burying that. And according to the 1,000 Sun cult of Foresight, the Corved Eye, none of them could actually see his eventual defeat, which is ominous and badass. Sanacht survived the burning of Prospero and is later hunted by Lucius the Eternal, who is specifically looking to prove himself against famous sword fighters. Sanacht and Lucius throw down, with the fight being even for some time before Lucius defeats him. Unfortunately, that's all we get. That one fight is basically his entire resume, which is an absolute tragedy because Sanacht sounds like he could have been one of the coolest duelists in the setting. Next up is Phocis Takar, captain of the Second Fellowship. He's a tragic figure, fighting valiantly throughout the Great Crusade, only to fall during the burning of Prospero. But let me tell you, his final stand is wild. As the Space Wolves tear through Prospero, Phocis is determined to kill Leman Russ. Phocis starts annihilating Custodes, Sister of Silence, and Space Wolves with ease, like full-on anime boss mode, until he ends up facing off with Constantine Valdor. And here's where it gets crazy. Phocis claims he could have killed Valdor in that moment, but instead he allowed himself to be slain because the power he had accumulated had triggered the flesh change. Mutating and losing control, he'd rather die than become a monster. It's hard to say if he really could have killed Valdor, but the fact that he was casually slicing through Custodes is reason enough to put him on this list. He burned bright and fast. And finally, we have the big gun himself, Ozek Araman, first captain and chief librarian of the 1,000 Suns. Master of foresight, telepathy, astral projection, and straight up warp sorcery, Araman is easily one of the most powerful psychers in all of 30k, and most likely 40k as well. And yes, he did fall to chaos during the burning of Prospero, so keep that in mind. He's getting some of that sweet Tzeentch buff later on. Let's look at some of his feats. During Prospero, Araman dueled Ruined Priest Orthero Weirdmake, and doesn't just kill him, he literally obliterates his soul, feeding them to the demonic warp predators in the warp. After surviving the destruction of Prospero, Araman leads a company of sorcerers to gather the shards of Magnus. While he can't take them down solo at first, once he makes a pact with a demon, he starts succeeding, and yes, we're counting chaos-empowered marines, so this means Araman was able to defeat a shard of Magnus. During the Siege of Terra, Araman goes full god mode. First, manipulating Perturabo's thoughts to serve the 1,000 Suns' interest. Yes, you heard that right, he literally manipulates a Primarch's mind. Let that sink in. He then would summon a horde of demons to assault Loyalist lines, and then infiltrate the Emperor's inner sanctum. All this is nothing compared to the feat he performs when he first arrives in the solar system, which is opening a massive warp rift, allowing thousands of traitor warships into real space. At this point, Araman isn't just a powerful space marine, he's a literal force of nature. So who's the strongest? Come on, you know who it is, it's Araman, easily. Sanacht is a phenomenal duelist with minor psychic buffs, but Araman's raw psychic ability is an entirely different league. Phocis, sure, his final stand was epic and his power level was clearly through the roof, but it burned him out. He fell to the flesh change. Araman's done similar things without unraveling into a mutating mess. He's mentally shattered, morally compromised, and completely terrifying. So let's make it official. Azek Airman is the strongest Thousand Sun Space Marine of the Horus Heresy. And for the sake of tradition, say it with me one last time before we move on. Magnus did nothing wrong. Up next, we're tackling the bald boys of the Sons of Horus. Let's go. The 16th Legion, the Sons of Horus, were once the shining vanguard of the Great Crusade. Charismatic, brutal, and utterly dominant. Originally known as the Luna Wolves, they were rebranded by their Primarch Horus after he was named War Master, a symbol of their elevated status and unmatched favor in the eyes of the Emperor. But with that pride came a dark fall. Horus's descent into treachery tore the Legion apart from within and sent shockwaves through the Imperium. The Sons of Horus became the core of the traitor forces during the Horus Heresy, leading assaults on Istvan, Dwell, Beta Garman, and eventually Terra itself. They fully embraced their War Master's cause, not out of blind faith, but out of bitter conviction that they were the true heirs of the Imperium. And as the heresy burned across the stars, the 16th Legion bled heavily, losing not just numbers, but their soul. By the Siege of Terra, the Sons of Horus were a shadow of their former selves, hardened by loss, failure, and the sheer weight of betrayal, but make no mistake, they were still killers of the highest order. Some of the heresy's most infamous warriors came from their ranks. So let's dive into the deadliest contenders the Sons of Horus have to offer. And yes, some of these guys are real monsters. First we have Garviel Loken, captain of the 10th Company of the Luna Wolves. He was a rare voice of honor in the chaos of the Great Crusade. Chosen for Horus's inner council, the Marneval, for his calm intellect and unshakable integrity. Loken was one of the few to sense something was deeply wrong, even before Davin. At the drop site massacre on Istvan III, he rallied loyalists and led the spectacular but doomed defense against traitor legions alongside Saul Tarvitz, enduring orbital bombardments, dueling Abaddon, and surviving the collapsing palace. Believed dead, he was later discovered insane and hunting plague zombies and was brought into Malkador's Knights Errant to stand as a beacon of remaining loyalty. He would fight in various engagements in the Heresy and is just overall the GOAT. Loken is far away one of the best duelists in the whole Heresy. He fights several key 30k characters such as Lucius, Abaddon, Tibalt Mar, Tormageddon, Horus Aximon, and a lesser form of Samus, the greater demon of ruin. Which if you haven't read The End and the Death, Part 3, Loken's death, which of course comes at the hand of the Kun himself, Erebus, is actually the point at which Samus is birthed. Okay, but back to Loken. This dude is a monster duelist. Sure, he loses to Lucius and Abaddon, but is able to slay several strong Astartes throughout the Heresy, like Horus Aximon and even the demon Tormageddon, who defeated Tylo Rubio. So Loken is definitely a powerhouse, but how does he compare to the others on this list? Next, we have Loken's Mournival brother, Ezekiel Abaddon, who began as the fearless first captain of the Luna Wolves and was trusted by the legions to lead. Even before the Heresy, he was a beast, known to dominate training grounds and duels in Terminator armor. During the Horus Heresy, Abaddon was among the first to betray the Imperium, fighting shoulder to shoulder with the traitor legions. He survived the dropsite massacre on Istvan III, famously dueling and defeating Garviel Loken, wounding him and leaving him for dead. I will remark, this fight between the two was actually quite close, and Abaddon was wounded in the fight. I also have to add that Abaddon is in Terminator armor, which means he has a significant advantage in one-on-one fights. So why do I consider Abaddon to be one of the strongest Space Marines in 30k? Well, because Chaos gives him quite a few buffs. Abaddon begins to become empowered by Chaos during the final battle of the Vengeful Spirit. So like with Sigismund and Karn, we're going to divide Abaddon into two different forms. Base form Abaddon and Chaos empowered Abaddon. I know a lot of you guys are like, wait, Cal, Abaddon doesn't like Chaos. He never was a slave. Incorrect. Abaddon still drank the Chaos Kool-Aid, he just refused to give his soul to the Chaos Gods. Let's start with base Abaddon. So like I stated above, Abaddon in this form does not have the same level of feats that empowered Abaddon does. He fights and beats Loken, which is still impressive, as Loken, as we just discussed, slew several powerful traitor marines throughout the Heresy. This form of Abaddon does lose to Ikos Lamida, who is appointed the champion of the Ultramarines, so he suffers one loss, but for the rest of the Heresy, his record is nearly flawless. Fighting Loken again during the Knights Errant infiltration of the Vengeful Spirit, and this time Abaddon bodies him easily. Abaddon would next fight Zardu Lyak, the Wordbearer's priest, and his 2 blade slaves, and managed to defeat all 3 of them. This was more of a sparring session, but still a formidable feat from Abaddon. Then comes one of the bigger duels that Abaddon has, which is against Jubal Khan, the Lord of the Summer Lightning. As one of the greatest champions of the Loyalist side, Jubal fights fiercely, but at the end of the day, he is no match for Abaddon, who slays him in 1 strike. And finally, during the Saturn Gambit, Abaddon takes on literally three Loyalist legionaries of remark: Nathaniel Garl, Bel Sepsis, and the Rivenhound himself, Inyard Har, which is absolutely insane. 2 of these guys were potential candidates for champion of their legion, and one of them could have been if it weren't for the Blood Angels being absolutely stacked. Abaddon battles Garl first, defeats him, and is about to kill him, but gets interrupted by the Blood Angel cell Bestis, who saves Garl, but is then slain after a duel with Abaddon. Immediately afterwards, Abaddon fights Inyard Har and kills him, but not before taking several power fists to the face, and I fully believe that if the Rivenhound had landed one more blow, Abaddon would have been dead. But of course, plot armor. It's like a literal cartoon. Loyalist after Loyalist keeps running at him, and Abaddon just knocks them all down. Mind you, this is all base Abaddon. What the hell, guys? Dude is so broken. But soon after, as the siege comes to a close, Abaddon finally embraced the gifts of chaos. This happens when the traitors encounter Constantine, Mother, Hek, and Valdor and his custodies right as the Emperor boards the vengeful spirit. So now we're looking at empowered Abaddon. Abaddon, realizing the custodies are about to absolutely facefuck them, Erebus, the Cunt Lord Supreme, convinces Abaddon and the rest of the Justeri Terminator Guard to accept the gifts of chaos. Erebus even remarks that Valdor himself might be able to kill them all, and we're talking about a combined force of Justeri and Wordbearers, possibly 60 Space Marines in total. God, I love Valdor. Abaddon and Valdor briefly fight, and Abaddon manages to catch a spear thrust from the Custodian with his bare hand. Valdor still lands a punch to his face, but that's about it. Soon after, zero gravity kicks in and causes the Custodians to float and lose their footing, at which point Abaddon launches himself at them, killing 3 Custodians pretty easily. Now, I'll admit this is less impressive because the Custodians were literally floating and at a big disadvantage, but still, Abaddon is a beast. But before we crown the winner, let's talk about the other 2 candidates first. Our third candidate is Horus Aximon, captain of the 5th Company and a member of the elite Mournival. Aximon was a master strategist and a steady hand amid the madness. He fought on Istvan III, visibly torn as he killed his former friends, but he remained loyal to Horus, although he would go on to suffer grievous injuries during the battles of Dwell and Hedda Gladys. So what are little Horus's feats? On Istvan III, he dueled and killed Torgotten, another member of the Mournival and a great duelist in his own right. Later, he fights Bayon Heinrichos and Hebo Khan. He kills Heinrichos, but Hebo carves his face like a cake. So yeah, Aximon scales below Hebo. He would then duel Sigismund during the Battle of the Solar War, and while he holds his own briefly, Sigismund would cut off his hand before teleporting away. And then finally, Aximon would fight his last duel against Logan during the Saturn Gambit and die. So yeah, he's got some wins under his belt, but overall, he's kind of a major loser. Our fourth and final candidate is Malachurst the Twisted. He served as Horus's chief advisor and was a brilliant manipulator and tactician. Malachurst was at Horus's side through countless campaigns. When Horus's soul was fractured, Malachurst guided him back through the warp and helped him restore his consciousness in Slaves to Darkness at the cost of his own life. Now, Malachurst isn't really a frontline fighter, but he makes up for it with serious warp power and demon lore. He's shown binding demons, performing chaos rituals, and empowering himself through dark sorcery. During Slaves to Darkness, it's stated that Malachurst had gathered a literal shit ton of warp power, and while he doesn't have major duels to his name, he's still a heavy hitter in the warp sorcery department. So who's the champion here? Well, it's obviously Abaddon, nearly undefeated with only 1 loss, somehow to Eco's Lamida. Hey, I don't write the lore. Abaddon, our top knot wearing princess, is the champion of the Sons of Horus, and it's not even close. Up next, it's everyone's favorite preacher boys. The 17th Legion, the Wordbearers, were the galaxy's first true zealots. Devout worshippers who believed the Emperor was a god and spent the Great Crusade building temples and preaching his divinity. This unchecked devotion caught the Emperor's wrath when he ordered the Ultramarines to raise their city of Monarchia as punishment for their heresy. Humiliated and enraged, Primarch Lorgar renounced the Imperial truth and set his legion on a darker path, embracing chaos by undertaking a pilgrimage into the Eye of Terror in search of the ultimate divine truth. 40 years before the Horus heresy erupted, the Wordbearers began to plan the greatest betrayal in human history. They orchestrated Horus's fall to chaos, betrayed the loyalists at Istvan, and unleashed the brutal Shadow Crusade across the Ultramar realm. Even as their numbers dwindled and Lorgar was banished from the traitor war effort after trying to usurp the War Master's throne from Horus, a great number of Wordbearers stayed true to the war effort and journeyed with Lubercal to Terra. But who's the champion of the Priest Boys? Since we're not counting Corfarion, I have 3 candidates in mind and I bet you could guess who they are. One of them is the best boy, another is a literal cunt, and another one is just weird. Let's start with the weird one, cause I too am feeling a little weird as we're very deep into this script and I think I'm going frickin' insane. Zardu Layak is our first candidate, the Crimson Apostle, a Chaos Chaplain of the Wordbearers, and a 6-eyed nerd. Originally a fanatic of the Imperial Creed, he became consumed by visions and rituals after the destruction of Monarchia, declaring himself the Binder of Souls and founding the Unspeaking Chapter. Zardu could summon demons from thin air, command their warp-born power, and fielded 2 blade slaves, hulking warriors with fused demonic blades. And yes, that's as metal as it sounds. Zardu is honestly one of my favorite Space Marines, which is wild considering this legion is packed with raging assholes like Erebus and Corfarion. But somehow they managed to produce 2 of my favorite characters. We'll get to the other one in a minute, and I'm sure you know who I mean. Zardu is also a pretty strong Space Marine in his own right, but we don't see him do a ton outside of summoning demons and talking to the warp like it's his own group chat. Technically, he binds Demon Primarch Fulgrim to him for a time, which is pretty insane, but he voluntarily releases him without even using that power. So I think it's fair to not include that in our evaluation since he never weaponizes Fulgrim. The most significant feat Zardu has, the Siege of Terra, where he literally holds back a Primarch. Yeah, Rogel Dorn to save Abaddon. I'm not kidding. Zardu fights fucking Rogel Dorn for a bit before being defeated and then detonates himself in an explosive warp ritual that knocks out Dorn and opens the first demonic portal on Terra. That's pretty nuts. Now yes, he did have help, his 2 blade slaves were with him and they're basically demon juice warriors with murder knives for arms, so that lessens the feat, but still, fighting a Primarch, that's something we can't ignore. Moving on to the cunt lord himself, Erebus. Erebus started as the first chaplain of the Wordbearers and became the greasy little speaker of the primordial truth. Positioned close to both Lorgar and Horus, he's the guy behind everything. The Interrex Anthem theft, the Davin corruption, the Horus fall, basically the galaxy's worst middle manager. But how powerful is the Bald Menace? Well, pretty annoyingly powerful, guys. When we first meet him in the lore, he takes on the entire Marnival and holds his own. He only loses to Abaddon, but he bodies the rest. Then later, Erebus duels Karn after beating several world eaters in a row. And yeah, Karn brutally wrecks him, which is fair, that's Karn. So we know Erebus definitely scales below the top tier duelists like Sigismund, Abaddon, Lucius, Jubal Khan, and of course, Karn. But Erebus doesn't just fight, he's a master of warp manipulation, shown summoning greater demons, regenerating from death, and performing insane rituals. Oh, and also he uses Annuncia. For those unfamiliar, Annuncia is an ancient forbidden language that alters reality itself when spoken. During the Siege of Terra, Erebus uses it constantly, collapsing walls, killing Astartes, controlling demons without needing packs. It's just simply nuts. So yeah, Erebus is a decent fighter and a complete warp monster. Finally, let's talk about our third and final candidate, the best boy himself, Argel Tau. Argel Tau rose from the Serrated Sun chapter to become a demon-hosted warlord. The first wordbearer to house a demon within himself, shout out Rom. After he and his chapter's pilgrimage into the Eye of Terror, Tau returned as a fusion of Astartes and demon, leading the elite Galvor back. He had warp-infused armor, demonic speed, strength, could fly, and had some of the best weapons in the Legion. Tau also forged a powerful bromance with Karn during the Shadow Crusade, and together they turned Ultramar into a butcher's yard. His fate was to die in the shadow of Great Wings, and I still think that meant he was supposed to duel Sanguinius at the Eternity Gate. But instead, in a twist that still haunts me, he was betrayed and killed by Erebus, who saw Tal's prophecy as a threat to his own power. So how strong was he? He's a demon-possessed monster capable of tearing through squads of Astartes like they were made of paper. But when it comes to high-end duels, we've only got one serious feat to look at. He defeats Aquilon, a Custodes, in single combat, which is frickin' insane. But that's basically it. So who's the strongest here? Well, it hurts me deeply to say this, but Argyle Tal is the first one we're eliminating. Please don't kill me, guys. His only major feat is killing a Custodes, which is beyond impressive, but Erebus and Zardu just scale above him in raw warp power and utility. Zardu fought a Primarch, and Erebus fights Perpetuals, basically Big E Lights, commands a Nuncia, and can summon Greater Demon like they're frickin' Pokemon. Farewell, my demon senpai. Now we're left with a cunt and a six-eyed nerd. Who wins? Let's break it down. Zardu has exceptional warp power, he fought Dorn with help, summoned demons, and blew himself up in a ritual that KO'd a Primarch. Erebus, on the other hand, fights on par with top Astartes, summons greater demons, regenerates, and uses reality warping language like it's a Monday morning coffee. So while Zardu's feat of holding off Dorn is wild, it wasn't solo. Erebus, meanwhile, is fighting entire perpetual kill squads, manipulating demons without packs, and pulling off warpcraft that bends reality. It pains me too much, guys. It really does, but Erebus is the champion of the word bearers. Damn. God, I want to kill myself right now. The 18th Legion, the Salamanders, are the stalwart protectors of the Imperium, unyielding in defense and fierce in offense. Born in the death world of Nocturne and forged in the crucible of volcanic flame, they blend brutal physical endurance with master-level craftsmanship. They wield incendiary weapons not for spectacle, but to cleanse and save, holding the line for civilians while melting the weapons of Xenos and heretics alike. Their Primarch Vulcan is a living testament to their creed, a master smith, a noble guardian, and rarely spoken, perpetual. During the Horus Heresy, Vulcan's flame never dimmed. Though the Salamanders were nearly annihilated during the Dropsite Massacre, alongside the Raven Guard and Iron Hands, the survivors, known as the Shattered Legions, rallied to protect civilians and reunite their role in the war. Before we dive into their champions, I've got to be honest, the Salamanders and Raven Guard were insanely hard to rank. Why? Because nearly all of them died at the Dropsite Massacre, and the Salamanders in particular got absolutely shafted. So rather than drag us through a list of no-name corpses, let's cut to the chase. Artelius Newman, captain of the Fire Drakes, is the clear and only real champion of the 18th Legion. Newman survived Istvan V, led hit-and-run tactics on traitor forces, and eventually faced off against two Dark Apostles, one of them being Erebus. He lost, obviously, got captured, then rescued by the Ultramarines and brought to Macragge. From there, he helped escort Vulcan's dead body back to Nocturne, only for it to be revealed that Vulcan needs to be awakened by Newman jumping in a volcano? Yeah, Nick Kime's a freaking idiot, guys. I hate him so much. Newman's story ends when he throws himself into a volcano to resurrect Vulcan for some odd reason. Rest in peace to Salamander fans, the Heresy was not kind to you. Newman's your champ by direct default. Now, let's move on to my favorite emo bird boys. The 19th Legion, known as the Raven Guard, were the galaxy's master of stealth and surgical strikes. Born on the harsh moon Deliverance, they were molded by their Primarch, Corvus Corax, into a force that didn't just engage in war, it conducted infiltration, sabotage, and lightning ambushes. They struck from the darkness, dismantling enemy leadership and collapsing defenses before their foes even knew what hit them. When the Horus Heresy erupted, the Raven Guard were among the first burned by betrayal at the Dropsite Massacre on Istvan V, where only a few thousand of their original 80,000 survived. Despite near annihilation, they refused to fade. Corax led a furious guerrilla campaign, striking traitor forces in the rear, cutting supply lines, and stalking fugitives while piecing the Legion back together. For the Raven Guard, I only have two candidates, but they are both monsters. Let's start with the wild card and then follow the candidate you all know I'm going to include. Our wild card is Cadeus Nex, also known as the Blood Crow or the Raven's Huntsman. And let me tell you, this guy is pure edge in the best way possible. A former convicted murderer from Deliverance, he earned a second chance under Corax by channeling that homicidal energy into productive murder across the Great Crusade. Next was a ghost in the battlefield, slipping into the shadows of the Dropside Massacre and then reappearing later during the incursion on Mars, where he helped Corvus Corax escape. He would later pop up again during the Siege of Chthoniya, fighting alongside Shattered Legion warbands like a feral Batman with dual hand cannons. Now, Nex doesn't really have a direct one-on-one duel or a major name kill on record, but we know he hunts traitor champions for sport. He's a walking execution order, Raven Guard John Wick style. Still without concrete feats, he's more of an awesome cameo than a real contender, which brings us to the GOAT of the 19th Legion, Naikoa Shuriken. A Mordafin, scout assassin, Shuriken is what happens when you mix a ninja, a ghost, and a snarky badass. Trained in the art of wraith slipping, Shuriken can virtually vanish into the shadows and reappear someone with a knife in your kidney. He survived Istvan V, escaped aboard the Sisyphia with the Iron Hands, and went on to pull off some truly legendary feats, like helping recover the Kryptos machine from a word-bearer's hellhole. But most notably, he shot Fulgrim in the head, he beat Lucius the Eternal twice, and not just I barely survived wins, he beat the shit out of Lucius the Eternal, only for Slaaneshi bullshit to bring the smug bastard back. He also beat Asher Messam, an Alpha Legion duelist who was so dangerous that even Alpharius was shocked when Shuriken took him down. So yeah, this isn't even close. Despite the Raven Guard getting absolutely dunked on at Istvan and having barely any characters left to choose from, Shuriken is easily one of the deadliest named Marines in the Heresy period. The Raven Guard champion is Naikoa Shuriken. Finally, we're at the last Legion, the Alpha Legion. Am I Alpharius? Or is that a lie? Let's find out. The 20th Legion, the Alpha Legion, is legendary for its unparalleled secretive warfare. Commanded secretly by twin Primarchs Alpharius and Omegon, they specialize in infiltration, sabotage, and psychological manipulation. Unlike any other legion, they embedded sleeper agents, sowed misinformation, and orchestrated coups all under the banner of Hydra Dominets. Influenced by a Xenos organization called the Cabal, they believed that tipping the Heresy in Horus's favor was the only way to force chaos to destroy itself, reframing their treason as a hidden strategy to safeguard humanity. Throughout the conflict, the Alpha Legion cells operated with conflicting agendas, some aiding traitors, others covertly protecting loyalists. Their loyalty, objectives, and endgame remain shrouded in secrecy, even now. Here are your top tier Horus Heresy era warriors from the Alpha Legion, and let me just say, it was insanely hard picking suitable candidates when every single one of them thinks they're Alpharius. Seriously, trying to pin down who's who in the Alpha Legion is like playing Guess Who while underwater, on fire, and missing your wallet. Yeah, it makes no sense, and neither do they. First up is Armilis Danat, also known as Griefbringer and Insta9, because of course the Alpha Legion give everyone like 6 names. Danat was a Hero Master, one of the Legion's elite brigade commanders during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. He was a master strategist, coordinating combined arms assaults that hit hard, fast, and surgically. Basically, the Blitzkrieg of the 31st millennium. But Danat wasn't just some behind-the-lines nerd with a map. On the battlefield, he wielded a thunderhammer and a power sword at the same time, dousing his foes in toxins and incendiary grenades, and generally mopped the floor with whatever poor bastard didn't die in the initial bombing runs. Next is Sheed Renko, a Terminator squad leader, deep cover infiltrator, and possibly Alpharius' evil twin's evil twin. What? Renko was so deep into the Legion's mask on mask on mask on mask routine that at one point he drank Omegon's blood to become his clone. Yeah dude, that's pretty frickin' weird. Renko infiltrated and obliterated entire watch stations solo, impersonated high-ranking officers, and could punch, sneak, and mindfuck with the best of them. He's basically what you'd get if Batman had a teleport Homer and a Primarch voice modulator. Third, and maybe the most mysterious, we have Exodus, the Alpha Legion's legendary sniper, or rather, snipers. The identity of Exodus is unclear, and that's by design. He's less of a person and more of a codename passed down like a cursed relic. Armed with a terrifying instrument sniper rifle, Exodus kills targets before the enemy even knows there's a war. No speeches, no banners, just one bolt round through the eye socket and a campaign collapses in silence. You see a one-man kill squad, a cabal of Alpharius snipers. Nobody knows, but if Exodus is in the area, someone's about to die quietly and dramatically. But here's the real issue with the Alpha Legion. They don't do champions. Their whole vibe is there is no I in Alpha. Their characters are purposely unknown, their accomplishments blurred, and their identities more tangled than a Reddit conspiracy thread. So what do we even do here? Well, out of the three, Armilis.net is the only one with a significant confirmed duel, and it's a pretty solid one. He goes toe-to-toe with Marius Gage, first master of the Ultramarines, and beats him. A solid, clean, confirmed dub. That's more you can say for half the Alpha Legion's ghost stories. So yeah, I'm calling it. Guys, I'm fucking tired and I can't do any more Bauer scaling of Space Marines. My gout brain is about to burst. And that's it. Finally. We've gone through every single legion in the Horus Heresy, dug into their deadliest warriors, examined their feats, weighed their scars, and tried to figure out who the absolute strongest really is. From loyalist legends like Sigismund and Sherokin to traitor monsters like Karn and Abaddon, we've covered an absolute insane range of badassery. Before we finally call it quits, let's recap all of our champions. The Dark Angels, the 1st Legion, was Corswain. The 3rd Legion, the Emperor's Children, was Lucius the Eternal. The Iron Warriors, the 4th Legion, was Forex. The 5th Legion, the White Scars, was Targutai Usui. The 6th Legion, the Space Wolves, was Beorn Fellhand. The 7th Legion, the Imperial Fists, was Sigismund the Black Templar. The 8th Legion, the Night Lords, was Sevatar. The 9th Legion, the Blood Angels, was Nasir Amit. The 10th Legion, the Iron Hands, was Thos. The 12th Legion, the World Eaters, was Karn. The 13th Legion, the Ultramarines, was Ecos Lamida. The 14th, the Death Guard, was Typhus the Traveler. The 15th, the 1,000 Sons, was Azek Airman. The 16th, the Sons of Horus, was Ezekiel Abaddon. The 17th, the Word Bearers, was Erebus. The 18th, the Salamanders, was Artillus Numan. The 19th, the Raven Guard, was Nykoa Sherokin. The 20th, the Alpha Legion, was Armilis Dynat. If you stuck around this long, you're a true warrior of the long war, my friend. And me, I'm fucking exhausted. This video was a massive undertaking. Writing, researching, recording, editing, this thing drained me like Fulgrim drains ketamine. See guys, I had to throw a ketamine joke in there or I wouldn't be able to function. If you enjoyed this video, or if you learned something, or if you laughed, or even if you just fiercely disagreed and are typing up a multi-length paragraph rage comment about how I disrespected your favorite captain, I genuinely appreciate you being here. But we're not done yet. This video was just the first step. I'll be following this one up with a full ranking of all the champions we covered here, pitting them directly against each other to see who truly reigns supreme in the Horus Heresy. And after that, we're diving into the current era, breaking down the strongest champions of each chapter in the 41st millennium. So if you want more epic matchups, deep lore, and way too much time spent talking about fictional Space Marines, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Let me know who you think the strongest Space Marine is down in the comments. Was there someone I miss? Someone I unfairly ranked too low? Let's fight it out, respectfully of course. Or not, it's 40K after all. If you like this, consider dropping a like, maybe even subscribing for more lore rants, breakdowns, and deep dives. I'm gonna go lie down and contemplate the warp, or maybe take a nap guarded by custodians. Either way, stay milked. I'll see ya in the next video.